Most people assume that bad sleep began when life became busy, bright, and modern. But for almost all of human existence, sleep was difficult long before alarm clocks, traffic, or glowing screens. The body that now asks for softness, warmth, stillness, and safety was shaped in a world that rarely offered any of them for long. So when you turn in bed and cannot fully settle, you may be feeling something much older than stress. Why humans couldn't sleep comfortably for 200,000 years. The body does not begin sleep from a place of complete trust. Even now, in a quiet room, with a stable surface beneath you and no visible threat, there is often a small delay between lying down and truly letting go. Muscles soften, but not all at once. The breath slows, but it remains slightly alert, as if listening. Ooh. This hesitation is subtle, almost easy to ignore, yet it reflects something deeply rooted. For most of human history, sleep did not occur in environments that allowed the body to fully release control. It happened in places where awareness could not disappear entirely without consequence. The nervous system that carries you into rest today was shaped in those conditions, not in the controlled spaces of the present. When early humans settled onto the ground at the end of a day, the surrounding world did not pause with them. The landscape remained active, and the boundary between rest and risk was never fully clear. Darkness did not remove danger. In many cases, it made perception more uncertain. Without stable shelter, without consistent barriers, the body could not assume that stillness was safe. Over long periods of time, this repeated exposure to uncertain conditions influenced how the brain regulates the transition into sleep. Instead of a complete shutdown, sleep became a gradual descent, one that preserved some level of responsiveness. This pattern is still visible today in the way people often wake briefly during the night, even in environments that are objectively secure. It is not necessarily a flaw. It may be a continuation of an older pattern where light sleep and intermittent awareness were more adaptive than deep, uninterrupted rest. The structure of human sleep reflects this balance. Rather than remaining in a single state, the brain moves through cycles, alternating between lighter and deeper stages. In lighter stages, the body remains more responsive to external changes. Sounds, shifts in temperature, or subtle movements can trigger partial awakening. In deeper stages, awareness recedes further, but these periods are limited in duration. This cycling pattern can be understood as a compromise between the need for restoration and the need for monitoring the environment. It suggests that the human body was not shaped in conditions where uninterrupted, deeply isolated sleep was consistently possible. Instead, it adapted to conditions where rest had to coexist with a degree of vigilance. Observations from different human societies, especially those living without modern infrastructure, support this idea. Sleep in such settings is often segmented, with periods of rest interspersed with quiet wakefulness. Individuals may shift position, adjust to environmental changes, or briefly become alert before returning to sleep. This does not necessarily indicate poor sleep quality. Rather, it reflects a pattern that aligns with long-term human biology. It also suggests that the expectation of continuous, unbroken sleep may be a relatively recent standard, shaped by environments that differ significantly from those in which the human species evolved. The body, however, does not immediately adjust to new conditions simply because they are more comfortable. It carries forward older regulatory patterns, even when the original pressures are no longer present. This is why the transition into sleep can still feel incomplete. The mind may remain slightly active, scanning or processing, even when there is no immediate reason to do so. This residual vigilance is not always conscious. It can exist as a background state, influencing how easily one falls asleep and how deeply one remains asleep. When considering the long span of human history, this makes sense. For a large portion of that time, individuals who remained too deeply asleep too quickly may have been less responsive to changes that required immediate action. Over many generations, the balance shifted toward a system that allowed rest while maintaining a reduced but persistent level of awareness. This balance, once necessary, may now feel like restlessness. Yet it is not random. It follows a structure that can be traced back to environments where safety was never absolute. Even in the absence of visible threats, the body does not fully abandon this structure. It continues to approach sleep as a state that must be entered carefully, not as a complete withdrawal. This helps explain why comfort alone does not guarantee ease of sleep. A soft surface, stable temperature, and quiet surroundings remove many external challenges, but they do not immediately alter the deeper regulatory patterns of the brain. The sense of needing to settle, to wait before fully relaxing, may reflect this mismatch between current conditions and the long history that shaped the body. When lying still in the present, the experience of slight unease or delayed rest can be seen not as a problem to be solved quickly, but as a continuation of a much older adaptation. The body is not simply responding to the moment. It is responding to a long sequence of environments where letting go too completely carried a cost. In this way, the difficulty of fully comfortable sleep is not only about the surface beneath you or the temperature of the room, it begins at a deeper level, in how the human organism learned to rest without ever entirely losing contact with the world around it. And this pattern, once established, does not disappear easily, even when the world has become quieter than it once was. If the body never fully releases control, then comfort depends not only on where one lies, but on how the brain continues to interpret the world beyond the closed eyes. Even in stillness, the mind does not become silent. It shifts into a different kind of listening. Breathing slows, muscles soften, but perception does not disappear. It narrows and becomes selective, holding certain signals while letting others fade. This quiet filtering is not something learned recently. It reflects a much older condition in which sleep had to remain connected to the surroundings, even when the body appeared at rest. When early humans lay down at night, the environment did not withdraw with them. Air moved, ground temperatures changed, and other living beings continued their own rhythms. In such conditions, complete disconnection would have carried risk. The brain adapted by allowing rest to coexist with a reduced but persistent awareness. This can still be observed in how the sleeping mind responds unevenly to sound. A steady, familiar noise may pass without reaction, while a sudden or irregular change can bring the body back toward wakefulness. The difference lies not in volume alone, but in pattern. The brain continues to compare incoming signals with what it expects. When something does not match, it interrupts rest. This ongoing comparison requires a level of activity that never fully stops. It is not the same as waking thought, but it is not absence either. It is a middle state, where the body is at rest but the mind remains lightly engaged. This middle state shapes the structure of human sleep. Rather than entering a single deep condition and remaining there, the brain moves through cycles, returning again and again to lighter stages where responsiveness is higher. Each return offers a brief opportunity to reassess the environment. Even if no threat is present, the system behaves as if one could appear. Over many hours, this creates a pattern of partial awakenings, small adjustments, and subtle shifts in position. These are often not remembered, but they form part of the night. In the long history of human life, such interruptions were not necessarily signs of poor rest. They were part of how rest was maintained under uncertain conditions. The body did not aim for complete stillness. It maintained a balance between recovery and awareness. Within groups, this balance extended beyond the individual. People slept close to one another, sharing warmth and proximity, but also sharing sensitivity to movement. If one person shifted, others might respond without fully waking. This created a form of collective awareness, where the group remained loosely connected even in sleep. No single person needed to stay fully alert at all times. Instead, responsiveness moved through the group in small, overlapping ways. This pattern did not require planning. It emerged from how human bodies react to nearby presence. Over time, it shaped expectations about what a night of rest feels like. Sleep was not a sealed, private experience. It was layered, responsive, and lightly connected to others and to the environment. When these patterns are compared with modern conditions, a quiet difference appears. Many people now sleep in spaces that are stable, enclosed, and often very still. External signals are reduced, sometimes to near silence. While this removes many disturbances, it also alters the pattern the brain receives. For some, this leads to deeper rest. For others, it creates a subtle imbalance. The absence of familiar background variation can make the system more sensitive to any new input. A single unexpected sound in an otherwise silent room may feel more intrusive than the same sound within a continuous background. This suggests that comfort is not simply the absence of disturbance. It is the presence of a pattern that the brain recognizes as stable. When that pattern is missing, the mind may continue to search, maintaining a low level of alertness without a clear reason. This is not a conscious process. It unfolds quietly, beneath awareness, influencing how easily one settles and how long one remains in deeper stages of sleep. Over the long span of human existence, the ability to rest while remaining partially open to the world would have been more reliable than complete withdrawal. The systems that support this ability are still present. They do not turn off simply because the environment has changed. They continue to guide the transition into sleep, shaping it as a gradual process rather than an instant shift. This is why the experience of lying down can include a period of waiting, as if the body is adjusting to something not immediately visible. It is not only adjusting to the bed or the room, but to the pattern of signals it receives. When those signals align with what the brain expects, rest becomes easier. When they do not, the body remains slightly engaged, holding on to a form of quiet vigilance that has been carried across many generations of human life. Even when the body finally settles, there is often a quiet boundary that is never fully crossed. It is the point where rest becomes deep enough to restore, but not so deep that awareness disappears entirely. This boundary is not fixed. It shifts throughout the night, rising and falling in response to internal rhythms and external conditions. What feels like a single continuous sleep is, in reality, a series of entries and exits from deeper states, each one shaped by the same underlying constraint. The body does not fully abandon its connection to the world. This pattern can be difficult to notice in modern environments because many of its movements are subtle. A slight change in breathing, a small adjustment of the head, a brief opening of the eyes that leaves no memory in the morning. Yet these moments accumulate, forming a structure that reflects a long history of sleeping in conditions where complete detachment was rarely safe. The body learned not to cross too far into stillness, because returning quickly to awareness could be necessary. Over time, this created a system in which sleep is layered, not absolute. Deeper stages exist, but they are bounded, surrounded by lighter phases that allow the mind to re-engage with the environment. This is not an imperfection. It is a form of regulation. It ensures that rest continues without fully removing the capacity to respond. In early human settings, this would have meant that even in the quietest moments of the night, the body remained prepared for change. A shift in temperature, the movement of air across the skin, or the presence of another body nearby could all be registered without requiring a full return to wakefulness. The brain could move toward alertness quickly, but it did not need to remain there. It could return to rest once the signal was processed. This fluid movement between states is still present. It can be felt in the way sleep sometimes deepens and then lightens again without clear cause. The cycles are not random. They follow a pattern that balances restoration with readiness. From a biological perspective, this balance may have been more reliable than a system that prioritized depth alone. A body that sleeps deeply but cannot respond quickly carries a different set of risks than one that rests more lightly but remains adaptable. Over long periods, the latter pattern appears to have been maintained. This helps explain why complete, uninterrupted comfort during sleep is not easily achieved, even when the physical environment allows it. The internal structure of sleep carries its own limits. It does not seek to maximize stillness at all times. It seeks to maintain a rhythm that has been shaped by conditions where the environment could not be fully controlled. When the surroundings become more stable, the system does not immediately change. It continues to follow its established pattern, moving in and out of depth, maintaining small points of contact with the external world. This can create a subtle tension between what the environment offers and what the body expects. A soft surface, a controlled temperature, and the absence of visible disturbance suggest that deeper rest should be possible. Yet the internal regulation remains cautious. It allows depth, but only for limited periods, before returning to lighter stages where awareness can briefly rise again. This does not mean that the body is malfunctioning. It means that it is following a structure that has been reinforced over a long span of time. In this context, the idea of perfectly comfortable sleep becomes more complex. It is not simply a matter of improving external conditions. It involves understanding that the body's approach to rest includes an element of restraint. It does not fully trust the absence of disturbance. it continues to operate as if some level of responsiveness is required. This can be felt most clearly in the moments just before sleep deepens, when the body hesitates slightly, as if deciding whether it is safe to let go further. That hesitation is not random. It reflects a system that has learned to approach rest gradually, testing the environment in small ways before allowing deeper states to emerge. When considering the long history of human life, this gradual descent makes sense. It reduces the risk of being caught unprepared, while still allowing the benefits of rest to accumulate over time. The result is a form of sleep that is effective, but rarely fully comfortable in the way modern expectations define comfort. It is shaped by compromise, by the need to restore the body while maintaining a quiet connection to the world. This connection does not disappear with the arrival of safer environments. It remains embedded in how sleep unfolds each night, guiding the body through a sequence of states that reflect not only the present moment, but also the conditions under which the human species learned to rest in the first place. When the body lies down, it does not meet a neutral surface. It meets a set of conditions that continue to shape how rest unfolds. In the present, that surface is often stable, soft, and designed to distribute weight. But across most of human history, the ground did not adapt to the body. The body had to adapt to the ground, and that difference changed the structure of sleep itself. The ground was rarely uniform. It carried small variations in height, firmness, and texture that could not be removed. Even when a place appeared flat, pressure was not evenly distributed. Certain areas of the body bore more weight, and over time those areas began to signal discomfort. The body responded in a predictable way. It shifted, slowly and often without full awareness, redistributing weight to reduce strain. These movements were not random. They followed the limits of joints and muscles, and they occurred repeatedly across the night. This pattern can still be observed today on less supportive surfaces. The body finds a position that feels acceptable for a time, but that position does not last. Gradual pressure builds again, and another adjustment follows. In this way, stillness is never maintained for long. Temperature adds another layer to this interaction. The ground does not change temperature as quickly as the air. It can remain cooler after sunset or retain heat from the day, depending on the environment. When the body stays in contact with such a surface, heat exchange begins to shape the experience of rest. A cooler ground can slowly draw warmth away from areas of contact, especially from the side of the body that is pressed against it. This does not require extreme cold to matter. Small differences are enough to create discomfort over time. The body reacts by shifting position, exposing a different area, and reducing the loss of heat in one place while increasing it in another. Over the course of a night, this process repeats, creating a cycle of contact, adjustment, and redistribution. Moisture further complicates this relationship. In many environments, the ground does not remain completely dry through the night. Humidity, condensation, or residual dampness can affect how the surface feels. Contact with moisture changes how temperature is perceived and how the skin responds. It can increase the sense of cold or create uneven contact between the body and the ground. These effects do not need to be severe to influence sleep. Even slight dampness can lead to small but repeated adjustments, each one interrupting deeper stages of rest. The human body is capable of sleeping under such conditions, but it does not ignore them. Sensory systems in the skin continue to register pressure, temperature, and texture, even when awareness is reduced. These signals do not always lead to full awakening, but they shape how long the body can remain in one position. Over time, they create a pattern in which rest is broken into segments, each one limited by the need to adjust. This suggests that the idea of lying still for many hours is not deeply rooted in human experience. Instead, movement is part of how the body manages contact with the surface beneath it. Across long periods of human existence, materials such as leaves, grasses, or animal skins may have been used to soften contact with the ground. These materials could reduce extremes, but they did not remove variation. The underlying surface remained present, influencing how weight was distributed and how temperature was exchanged. The body still needed to respond, to shift, and to adapt. The expectation of a surface that conforms closely to the body is a relatively recent development. The body itself, however, has not been reshaped to depend on such conditions. It continues to operate with systems that assume variation rather than uniform support. This can be seen in the way people still change position during sleep, even on surfaces designed for comfort. The impulse to move does not disappear. It reflects a deeper pattern in how the body manages pressure over time. When considering why sleep was rarely comfortable for much of human history, the nature of the ground becomes central. It was not only firm, it was variable, active in its own way, and never fully aligned with the structure of the body. Rest had to occur within this mismatch. The body adapted by remaining responsive, by adjusting again and again, and by never settling completely into one position for long. That pattern, repeated across many generations, remains present. Even now, when the surface is more stable, the body continues to move, as if it still expects the ground to change beneath it. A surface does more than hold the body. It also determines how easily the body can remain in one position without strain. This matters because sleep depends not only on closing the eyes, but on reducing the small physical signals that call the body back toward movement. When support is uneven, those signals return sooner. Across most of human history, this would have been difficult to avoid. The sleeping place may have been chosen carefully, but it still remained part of the natural environment, shaped by soil, stone, roots, plant matter, or packed earth. Even when people used natural materials to make the ground more tolerable, the surface beneath them did not become truly stable in the modern sense. It remained a place the body had to negotiate with, not fully trust. One reason this matters is that the human body has areas that are especially sensitive to prolonged pressure. The hips, shoulders, ribs, and knees do not all tolerate contact in the same way. When one part of the body bears too much weight for too long, muscles begin to hold tension rather than release it. That tension may be mild, but during sleep, even mild strain matters. The body responds before pain becomes strong. It changes position, adjusts the spine, shifts the legs, or turns the head. These movements are part of normal sleep, but on a harder and less even surface they would likely have been more frequent. Rest was still possible, but it was not the kind of still, uninterrupted comfort often imagined today. There is also the question of alignment. On a uniform and supportive surface, the body can settle with less distortion. On irregular ground, this is harder. A slightly raised area under the shoulder or hip can change how the spine rests. A hollow under one side of the back can change muscle tension across the night. These are small effects, but sleep is shaped by small effects repeated many times. A person does not need to wake fully for sleep to become lighter or less settled. The body can respond in quieter ways, through repositioning, shallower sleep, or brief returns toward awareness. This helps explain why the quality of a sleeping surface matters even when exhaustion is strong enough to make sleep possible. Falling asleep and sleeping comfortably are not the same thing. The environment also changes from night to night. A place that seemed suitable in the evening could feel different after several hours of cooling air, rising dampness, or shifting wind. This instability meant that comfort could not be fixed at the start of the night. The body had to keep responding as conditions changed. In that sense, rest was not a single stable event. It was an ongoing adjustment between body and ground. This fits the wider pattern already visible in human sleep. Rest is not complete withdrawal, but a process that remains partly open to the physical world. The ground itself was one of the reasons for that openness. It continued to send information through contact all night long. Widely accepted evidence from archaeology and anthropology suggests that early humans used a range of sleeping arrangements depending on place, season, and available materials. But there is no strong basis for imagining that most of those arrangements provided the consistent softness or support that many people now associate with comfort. Natural bedding could improve conditions, yet it remained limited by the environment and by the materials at hand. That means the body still had to do much of the work itself. It had to adapt posture, regulate contact, and keep moving enough to avoid prolonged strain. This does not mean early humans never rested well. It means comfort was probably narrower, more temporary, and more dependent on circumstance. The modern idea of a surface designed specifically to reduce pressure across the whole body belongs to a very recent part of human history. For far longer, sleep happened on surfaces that were workable rather than ideal, and that difference matters. It suggests that one reason humans could not sleep comfortably for such a long span of time was not only danger, cold, or noise, but the simple fact that the body was resting on ground that rarely matched its shape for more than a short while. The body could sleep there. It could recover there. But it likely had to keep negotiating with the surface beneath it, again and again, through the whole long history of human rest. Even when a place on the ground was chosen with care, it could not remain unchanged through the night. What felt acceptable at the moment of lying down did not guarantee the same condition hours later. The environment continued to move, slowly but continuously, and the body remained in contact with those changes. This meant that sleep was not only shaped by the surface itself, but by how that surface shifted over time. A layer of soil could settle under weight, loose plant material could compress. Small irregularities that were unnoticed at first could become more pronounced after remaining in one position. These were not dramatic changes, but they accumulated. The body sensed them gradually, not as a single event, but as a slow alteration in pressure and support. When that alteration reached a certain point, the body responded by adjusting position. This process repeated, creating a night that was structured by many small negotiations rather than one stable condition. Temperature continued to shift as well. After sunset, ground and air often move in different ways. The surface beneath the body may cool at a different rate than the air above it. As the night progresses, this difference can become more noticeable. A surface that felt neutral earlier may begin to draw heat away from the body more strongly. The effect is often gradual, not sharp enough to wake a person fully, but enough to change how comfortable a position feels. The body responds by turning, reducing contact in one area and increasing it in another. Over time, these adjustments become part of the rhythm of rest. They are not conscious decisions, but they influence how deeply the body can remain in one state before shifting again. Moisture can follow a similar pattern. Even in environments that seem dry, changes in air temperature can lead to condensation or increased dampness near the ground. Contact with a slightly damp surface changes how the skin perceives both pressure and temperature. It can make a surface feel colder or less stable. This does not need to be extreme to matter. Small changes in sensation are enough to alter how long a position can be maintained without adjustment. The body responds in the same way it does to pressure or temperature, by moving, subtly but repeatedly. Over the course of a night, these movements divide sleep into segments that are shorter than they might otherwise be. The structure of rest becomes a sequence of positions rather than a single continuous state. Another factor is the absence of clear boundaries. A surface on the ground is not separated from its surroundings in the way a raised or enclosed sleeping place can be. Edges are not fixed, materials can shift, and the area of contact can expand or contract. This creates a sense of uncertainty in how the body is supported. One part of the body may rest on firmer ground, while another rests on something softer or less stable. This uneven support requires constant adjustment. The body cannot fully rely on the surface to remain consistent. Instead, it maintains a readiness to respond, even in the absence of obvious disturbance. This readiness is not only about external threats, it is also about maintaining physical balance in contact with a surface that does not fully conform to the body. From a broader perspective, these conditions suggest that sleep on natural ground was shaped by variability rather than stability. The body was capable of resting under such conditions, but that rest was influenced by continuous small changes in contact, temperature, and support. Over long periods of human history, this pattern would have been familiar. It did not prevent sleep, but it limited how long any single position could remain comfortable. As a result, movement became part of rest, not an interruption of it. This helps explain why even in modern environments, where surfaces are more stable, the body still tends to shift during the night. The impulse to move is not only a response to current discomfort, it reflects a longer pattern in which the body expects conditions to change. It prepares for that change by remaining flexible, by avoiding complete stillness for extended periods. When considering the idea of comfortable sleep, it becomes clear that stability plays a central role. Without a surface that remains consistent across time, comfort cannot be sustained. For most of human existence, such stability was limited. The ground was not designed to support the body evenly or continuously. It changed with temperature, moisture, and pressure, and the body had to adjust in response. This ongoing adjustment shaped the structure of sleep itself. It made rest something that unfolded through movement, through repeated small corrections, rather than through long periods of unbroken stillness. Even now, when conditions are more controlled, that underlying pattern has not disappeared. It remains present in the way the body continues to move, as if it still expects the ground beneath it to shift, even when it no longer does. When sleep begins, the body does not simply become still, it also begins to change how it manages heat. This is one of the least visible parts of rest, but across most of human history it was one of the most important. A sleeping body is less active, less mobile, and less able to respond quickly to cold or shifting air. That means the conditions of the night matter more once wakefulness fades. In the modern world, blankets, insulation, and controlled indoor temperatures reduce this problem. But for most of human existence, the night placed the body in direct contact with cooling air, changing ground temperatures, and whatever protection the immediate environment could provide. Sleep had to happen inside those limits, not outside them. The human body is capable of regulating temperature well under many conditions, but sleep changes that balance. When resting, movement decreases and heat production can fall. The body no longer generates warmth in the same way it does during active waking life. At the same time, the body becomes less likely to notice small changes early enough to correct them. A person who is awake can shift, stand, walk, add material, or move toward shelter. A person who is asleep reacts more slowly. This makes nighttime temperature a special problem. It is not only about surviving severe cold. It is about the constant challenge of maintaining enough warmth for sleep to remain stable. Even moderate cooling can matter when it continues for hours. One reason this mattered so deeply in early human life is that the human body is not covered in dense, insulating fur. This is one of the defining biological differences between humans and many other mammals. Human skin loses heat more directly to the environment, especially when air moves across it or when the body is in contact with cooler surfaces. During the day, this reduced body hair has advantages, especially in relation to heat dissipation during movement. But at night, when activity falls and air temperatures often drop, the same body becomes more exposed. This does not mean early humans were helpless in cold conditions. It means they depended more heavily on behavior, group proximity, shelter, fire in some contexts, and available materials to reduce heat loss. Comfort, therefore, was not built into the body alone. It depended on circumstances that were not always reliable. Sleep becomes more difficult when the body is working to protect warmth. Muscles may tighten slightly. Posture may change to reduce exposed areas. Limbs may draw inward. These are not dramatic actions, but they affect how deeply rest can unfold. A body that is conserving heat is not resting in a fully open way. It is adjusting, guarding, narrowing itself. This can still be felt now when a room becomes slightly too cool at night. Sleep may continue, but it often becomes lighter, more interrupted, more dependent on repositioning. Over a long human past, this pattern would have been common rather than exceptional. The problem was not always extreme cold. It was instability. Temperatures often changed across the night, sometimes gradually, sometimes more quickly. Wind could alter how the skin lost heat. Ground contact could pull warmth away from one side of the body. A sleeping place that felt acceptable in the evening could feel very different by the middle of the night. The body had to keep responding, and each response made sleep less continuous. Widely accepted evidence from anthropology and human biology supports the basic picture that sleep in non-controlled environments is shaped strongly by temperature, exposure, and available insulation. It also supports the idea that human rest has long depended on modifying the environment rather than relying on the body alone. This matters for the question at the center of the video. Humans could sleep across many climates and landscapes, but comfortable sleep required a degree of thermal stability that nature did not reliably provide. The body could manage, it could adapt, but it often had to do so while half protected, partly exposed, and never fully separated from the cooling world around it. That is why the history of human sleep is also a history of heat loss, of shared warmth, of small adjustments in posture and position, and of a body trying to stay at rest while the night slowly pulled warmth away from it. As the night continues, the body does not hold a fixed temperature on its own. It depends on a balance between what it produces and what it loses. During sleep, that balance becomes more fragile. The body reduces activity, and with it, the steady generation of warmth that movement provides. At the same time, awareness fades, and the ability to respond quickly to gradual cooling becomes limited. This creates a quiet vulnerability. The body is still regulating itself, but it is doing so more slowly, with fewer immediate corrections. In environments where temperature remains stable, this may not be noticeable, but in open or lightly sheltered conditions, small changes can accumulate over time and begin to shape the depth and continuity of sleep. One widely accepted observation in human biology is that the body does not maintain a single constant temperature across all states of rest. Instead, it follows a daily rhythm, lowering its core temperature during the night as part of the transition into sleep. This process supports rest, but it also means that the body is starting from a slightly reduced level of warmth. When combined with external cooling, the effect becomes more pronounced. Heat is gradually drawn away through contact with air and ground, and without frequent movement, that loss is not easily offset. The result is not always a sudden sensation of cold, but a slow shift toward discomfort that encourages subtle changes in posture. The body may curl slightly, bringing limbs closer to the center, or turn to reduce exposure on one side. These movements are small, but they interrupt the stillness required for deeper stages of sleep to continue without disturbance. Another factor is that different parts of the body lose heat at different rates. Areas with more exposure or direct contact with cooler surfaces can lose warmth faster. When one side of the body becomes cooler than the other, balance is disrupted. The body responds by rotating or shifting weight, attempting to even out the distribution of heat. This creates a repeating pattern. A position feels acceptable for a time, then gradually less so, leading to another adjustment. Across a full night, these adjustments can occur many times without being remembered. They do not necessarily wake the person fully, but they shape how long deeper sleep can be maintained before returning to lighter stages. In early human environments, these processes would have been influenced by factors that changed continuously. Air movement could increase or decrease, altering how quickly heat was lost from the skin. The ground could cool more quickly than the air, drawing warmth away from areas of contact. Natural coverings, if present, might shift or compress, changing how well they insulated the body. None of these changes needed to be extreme. Their effect came from persistence. A small imbalance, sustained over time, becomes enough to alter the body's state. This is consistent with what is known about sleep more broadly. It is sensitive to ongoing conditions, not only to sudden disruptions. From an anthropological perspective, it is widely accepted that early humans relied on a combination of behavior and environment to manage nighttime temperature. Group proximity could reduce heat loss. Sheltered locations could limit exposure to wind. Materials such as plant matter or animal skins could provide some insulation, but these strategies depended on availability and context. They were not always present, and when they were, their effectiveness varied. This means that the body often had to compensate for gaps in protection. It did so through posture, through movement, and through the structure of sleep itself. Rather than remaining in a single deep state, the body cycled, returning periodically to lighter stages where adjustments could occur more easily. This pattern aligns with the broader structure of human sleep, which alternates between depth and responsiveness. It suggests that thermal regulation is not separate from sleep, but part of how sleep is organized. When temperature is stable, these cycles may feel smoother. When it is not, they become more pronounced. In this way, the difficulty of maintaining comfortable sleep over long periods of human history can be understood as a result of ongoing interaction between the body and a changing environment. The body was capable of resting, but it rarely did so under conditions that allowed it to remain undisturbed for long. Instead, it moved through the night in small steps, adjusting again and again to preserve warmth while still allowing rest to continue. This balance did not eliminate sleep, but it shaped it into a form that was responsive rather than fully settled, and that form remains present even when the environment has become more controlled than it once was. Even when the body finds a position that feels warm enough, that warmth is rarely stable for the entire night. Heat does not stay evenly distributed. It shifts slowly between the body and the surrounding air, between one side of the body and the other, and between the body and the surface beneath it. This shifting is not dramatic, but it is continuous. Over time, it changes how the body experiences rest. A position that begins in comfort can gradually move toward imbalance, not because something sudden has happened, but because heat has been lost in one area more than another. The body senses this change and responds in the only way available during sleep, by moving. This movement is often small, a turn of the shoulder, a repositioning of the legs, a slight curling inward. Each adjustment redistributes warmth, but only temporarily. After some time, the same pattern returns. One side cools more than the other, contact with the ground draws heat away again, and another adjustment follows. Across a full night, this cycle can repeat many times. It does not necessarily break sleep completely, but it prevents the body from remaining in a single deeply settled state for long. Instead, rest becomes a sequence of short phases, each one shaped by the balance of heat at that moment. Another aspect is how the body prioritizes different areas when conserving warmth. The central part of the body, where vital organs are located, tends to be protected more strongly. Limbs, by contrast, can lose heat more quickly. This creates a subtle gradient across the body. Hands, feet, and exposed areas may become cooler, while the center remains warmer. During sleep, this difference can influence posture. The body may draw limbs inward, reducing exposure and limiting heat loss. While this helps preserve warmth, it also changes muscle position and can reduce the sense of openness that supports deeper rest. A more compact posture can lead to earlier buildup of pressure in certain areas, which then requires adjustment. In this way, thermal regulation and physical comfort are linked. Efforts to conserve heat can increase the need to move, and movement can interrupt deeper stages of sleep. In environments where insulation was limited or inconsistent, this balance would have been difficult to maintain. Natural coverings could provide some protection, but they did not fully stabilize temperature. They could shift, compress, or lose effectiveness as the night progressed. Shelter could reduce wind, but it could not always prevent gradual cooling. Fire, where available, could provide warmth, but it required maintenance and did not always produce even heat across a resting group. These factors are widely discussed in anthropological and archaeological research, and they point to a general pattern. Warmth was often managed, but rarely fixed. The body remained part of that process, adjusting continuously rather than settling into a stable condition. This has an important implication for how sleep is structured. If warmth cannot be held constant, then the body must remain ready to respond to its loss. That readiness appears in the form of lighter sleep stages, brief returns toward awareness, and frequent small movements. These are not signs of failure. They are part of how the body maintains itself under changing conditions. Deep, uninterrupted sleep becomes harder to sustain when the environment does not provide steady thermal support. Instead, sleep unfolds in layers, with each layer allowing the body to reassess and adjust before returning to deeper rest again. When considering the long history of human life, this pattern becomes easier to understand. The night was not a fixed state. It was a gradual process of cooling, shifting air, and changing contact with the ground. The body had to remain engaged with that process, even while resting. It could not fully withdraw from it, because doing so would mean losing the ability to respond to changes that affected comfort and, in some cases, safety. Over many generations, this created a form of sleep that is adaptable but rarely fully stable. Even now, when environments are more controlled, traces of this pattern remain. People still adjust blankets, shift position, or wake briefly when temperature changes. These actions are familiar, but they point to a deeper history. They suggest that the human body has long been shaped by nights in which warmth had to be managed moment by moment, not assumed. In that context, the idea of perfectly comfortable sleep becomes less about eliminating all disturbance and more about understanding the limits of what the body was shaped to expect. It was shaped to rest while maintaining warmth in a changing environment, not in one that remains completely constant from the beginning to the end of the night. When the body begins to rest, it does not leave the world of sound behind. Even with the eyes closed and movement reduced, hearing remains active. It becomes less focused but not absent. This matters because the night is not silent. In natural environments, Sound continues in many forms: wind passing through surfaces, insects maintaining steady rhythms, animals moving at varying distances, and the subtle noises created by other human bodies nearby. None of these need to be loud to influence sleep. What matters is that they are present, changing, and not fully predictable. The brain does not ignore sound completely during sleep. It lowers its response, but it continues to monitor patterns. This is widely recognized in sleep research. Familiar, consistent sounds tend to be filtered out more easily, while irregular or unexpected changes are more likely to draw attention. The system is not simply reacting to volume, it is comparing what is heard with what is expected. When the pattern remains stable, sleep can deepen. When it shifts, even slightly, the body may return toward a lighter state. This does not always lead to full awakening, but it changes the depth of rest. Across a single night, such small shifts can occur many times. In early human environments, this process would have been constant. There were no controlled sound conditions, no separation between the sleeping body and the surrounding landscape. Sound moved freely through space, shaped by distance, terrain, and activity. A quiet period could be followed by subtle movement. A steady rhythm could change without warning. The body did not need to identify each sound, but it needed to remain capable of detecting change. This requirement shaped how hearing operates during sleep. Instead of turning off, it remains open at a reduced level, allowing rest while preserving responsiveness. Within groups, sound also carried information about nearby presence. The movement of another person, a shift in posture, or a change in breathing could be detected without full awareness. This created a shared acoustic environment where individuals were loosely connected even in rest. If one person stirred, others might adjust in response, not through conscious decision but through the sensitivity of the sleeping brain to nearby signals. This kind of interaction is consistent with what is known about human social sleep patterns in less controlled settings. It suggests that sleep was not isolated. It was shaped by the presence of others and by the sounds they produced, even unintentionally. This does not mean that all sound was disruptive. In some cases, continuous background noise can support sleep by creating a stable pattern that the brain recognizes as normal. However, stability was not always guaranteed. Natural environments often contain variation, and variation is what the brain responds to most strongly. A sudden change, even if small, can be enough to shift the body toward lighter sleep. Over time, this creates a structure in which rest is repeatedly adjusted in response to the acoustic environment. The body does not remain in one deep state for long without returning to a level where sound can be reassessed. From a broader perspective, this suggests that the idea of complete silence as a condition for good sleep is not deeply rooted in human history. Instead, sleep has long occurred in the presence of ongoing sound, with the brain maintaining a selective openness to it. The challenge is not sound itself, but unpredictability. When sound follows a pattern, the brain can adapt. When it changes, even slightly, the system responds. This response may be brief and may not reach awareness, but it affects how continuous rest can be. In modern environments, sound can be reduced or controlled, but the underlying system remains the same. The brain still monitors, still compares, still reacts to change. This helps explain why even small disturbances at night can feel significant, especially when they break an otherwise stable pattern. It also explains why some forms of consistent background sound can feel calming, while irregular noises are more disruptive. When considering why sleep was rarely fully comfortable across much of human history, sound becomes part of the explanation. It was not always loud or overwhelming, but it was rarely absent, and it was rarely constant. The body adapted by keeping hearing partially active, by allowing rest to coexist with monitoring. This adaptation made sleep possible in a changing environment, but it also limited how deeply and continuously the body could remain at rest. Even now, in quieter spaces, that pattern continues. The ears do not close. The brain does not stop listening. It remains connected to the world through sound, shaping each night into a balance between rest and awareness, rather than a complete separation from the environment. Sound at night does not need to be loud to matter. What affects sleep most often is not intensity, but change. A steady background can fade into the edge of awareness, but a break in that pattern can draw the brain back toward alertness. This is one reason the sleeping mind remains so sensitive to irregular signals. It is not treating every sound as equally important. It is watching for shifts. During most of human history, the night would have contained many of them. Air could move differently across the landscape from one hour to the next. Insects might keep a steady rhythm and then suddenly fall quiet. Nearby bodies could shift position, cough, breathe more heavily, or rise briefly. None of these changes needed to signal danger in every case, but the brain could not assume that they never mattered. So sleep developed with a built-in openness to variation. This openness helped protect the body, but it also made continuous comfort harder to maintain. One important detail is that sound does not reach the sleeping person as isolated events. It arrives as part of a whole acoustic pattern. The brain seems to form expectations even during rest. When a pattern remains stable, it becomes easier for the body to stay settled. When it changes unexpectedly, even slightly, the brain may respond before the person becomes fully conscious. Sleep grows lighter, muscles prepare for movement, or the eyes may open for only a moment. By morning, none of this may be remembered, yet it still shaped the night. Rest was not broken only by major disturbances. It was also shaped by repeated minor deviations from what the brain had begun to treat as normal. In early human settings, this would have been especially important because sound often carried information that vision could not provide in darkness. At night, hearing becomes one of the main ways the body remains connected to the environment. The eyes are closed, light is limited, and movement is reduced. Sound fills that gap. It provides clues about distance, direction, movement, and proximity. A body that ignored it too completely would be cut off from a major source of information. So the sleeping brain remained partly engaged. This does not mean that early humans lay awake in fear. It means the body likely rested in a way that preserved sensitivity to the acoustic world around it. That sensitivity would have been useful, but it also meant that comfort had limits. Sleep could deepen, but it could not always remain untouched by change. The presence of other people added another layer. Humans have long slept near one another, and nearby bodies create nearby sounds. Breathing, turning, shifting weight, or making contact with the ground all become part of the night's pattern. In one sense, this could be reassuring. Familiar sound may reduce uncertainty, but it also means that sleep is partly shaped by others' movements and rhythms. One person's adjustment can become another person's disturbance. In that way, social sleep brings both protection and interruption. The group may be safer together, warmer together, more stable together, but not necessarily quieter in a way that guarantees deeper rest for every individual. This makes comfortable sleep more difficult to define. It is not just silence that matters. It is whether the sound environment remains predictable enough for the brain to keep filtering it out. Widely accepted sleep research supports this broader point. The sleeping brain continues to process sound selectively rather than shutting hearing down completely. That fits well with what anthropology suggests about human life outside modern controlled environments. Sleep took place in shared spaces, changing landscapes, and open acoustic settings. The body could adapt to them, but adaptation did not mean total ease. It meant learning to rest while still listening. That is a useful ability, yet it carries a cost. The cost is that rest remains partly exposed to interruption. Even now, in more sheltered conditions, the same pattern continues. A familiar fan, distant rain, or steady low sound may fade into the background, while a small unexpected noise can pull the body instantly toward wakefulness. This is not only a modern annoyance, it reflects an older design. The brain continues to treat night as a time when sound might matter, and because of that, human sleep has long depended on a compromise. Enough openness to hear change, enough calm to keep sleeping, but rarely the perfect silence or certainty that would allow the body to rest without any need to listen at all. Even when the night sounded calm, it was rarely truly still. What matters in sleep is not only whether noise is present, but whether the environment remains predictable long enough for the brain to stop testing it. In natural settings, that kind of stability would have been difficult to maintain for an entire night. Sounds rise and fade, distances change, wind shifts direction, nearby bodies move, and the landscape itself produces different kinds of acoustic texture. as temperature and air change. A sleeping person does not need to identify each of these signals for them to matter. The brain only needs to detect that something has changed. Once that happens, sleep may not end completely, but it often becomes lighter. The body returns partway toward awareness, just enough to reassess. Then, if nothing further follows, it settles again. This repeated movement between deeper and lighter rest helps explain why sleep can feel continuous while still being full of brief interruptions. One reason this matters so much is that sound at night often carries uncertainty more than information. In daylight, the body can compare sound with sight and movement. At night, especially in darker environments, hearing has to do more of the work. A distant shift in the acoustic pattern may not tell the body exactly what is happening, but it tells the body that something is happening. That alone is enough to affect the depth of sleep. This does not mean the body assumes danger every time. It means the body avoids becoming so disconnected that change cannot be detected. Over long periods of human life, this would have been a practical balance. The sleeping brain did not need to stay fully awake, but it also could not fully stop listening. Rest had to remain compatible with uncertainty. This becomes even more important when considering that natural sound is not random in the same way mechanical noise often is. It tends to form patterns. Insects may create a steady layer of sound. Wind may repeat in pulses. Water may provide a continuous rhythm. Other people sleeping nearby may breathe or move in familiar ways. The brain can adapt to these patterns and treat them as background. But if one layer drops out suddenly, or if a familiar rhythm changes, the brain notices the break. A sudden silence can matter as much as a sudden sound. This is widely consistent with the broader understanding that the sleeping brain responds strongly to novelty and disruption in pattern, not simply to loudness. In a shared sleeping environment, this pattern sensitivity becomes even more complex. The body is not only tracking the landscape but also the group. A shift from one nearby person may lead to a subtle response in another. One movement can pass through the sleeping group in small waves without anyone fully waking. This would have made sleep socially connected as well as environmentally exposed. Shared sleep could increase safety and warmth, but it also meant that each individual rested within a field of small sounds and movements produced by others. The night was never entirely private. It was collective, and that collectiveness shaped the way sleep was maintained. From the perspective of the title, this matters because it shows that discomfort did not come only from cold ground or temperature loss. It also came from the fact that the sleeping mind had to remain acoustically engaged with a world that kept changing. The body could rest within that world, but not fully seal itself away from it. Deep sleep was possible, yet it had to coexist with a listening system that remained partly active. That system was useful, but it had a cost. The cost was that comfort could not become absolute. The mind had to stay available to the environment, and availability always leaves room for interruption. Even now, this older pattern remains easy to recognize. A person may sleep through a steady background sound for hours, yet wake almost instantly at a small, unfamiliar noise or an abrupt silence. The reaction can seem disproportionate, but it reflects a very old structure. The brain still treats the night as a place where patterns matter. It continues to rest with one part of itself turned slightly outward. That is why human sleep, across so much of history, was unlikely to be completely comfortable. It was not only taking place in darkness, it was taking place in a world that kept speaking softly around the body, and the body never fully stopped listening to it. For most of human history, sleep did not happen in a space that belonged to one person alone. It happened near others, often very near. Because closeness offered advantages the isolated body could not easily create for itself. Shared warmth, shared awareness, and the simple fact of not being alone in darkness all mattered. But what helped make sleep possible did not always make it comfortable. The presence of other bodies changed the structure of rest. It added heat, sound, movement, and unpredictability. Sleep became not only a relationship between the body and the ground, or the body and the temperature of the night, but also between one body and the bodies nearby. This is one reason truly private. Undisturbed sleep is a relatively recent experience rather than an ancient human norm. A sleeping group creates its own environment. Breathing patterns overlap. Limbs shift. Weight presses into shared surfaces. One person turns, and another feels the movement through the ground or through contact with nearby materials. These are small effects, but sleep is shaped by small effects repeated over many hours. The body does not need a major disturbance to leave deeper rest. A nearby adjustment, a brief sound, a change in shared warmth, or a shift in available space can be enough to bring sleep into a lighter state. In modern life, people often imagine comfort as freedom from interruption, but in long stretches of human life, rest was more often organized around tolerated interruption. The group helped protect the sleeper, yet the group also made stillness harder to maintain. Shared warmth may have been one of the clearest benefits of sleeping close together. Human bodies lose heat, and nearby bodies reduce that loss by creating a more stable thermal environment. This would have mattered greatly in conditions where insulation was limited or inconsistent. But warmth shared with others is not perfectly controlled. A group can become warmer or cooler as bodies shift, as someone moves away, or as positions change through the night. One side of the body may receive more warmth while another remains exposed. A person may curl inward, then gradually need to adjust as heat builds or fades. This means that social sleep could reduce one discomfort while introducing another. The body gained protection from exposure, but it also had to adapt to the changing thermal and physical presence of others. Space itself was also limited. When several people occupy the same sleeping area, posture cannot be chosen freely and kept indefinitely. The body must fit into the space available. This can affect how fully one can extend, turn, or avoid pressure on certain areas. Even slight restrictions matter over time. If a position cannot be changed easily without disturbing others, tension may build before movement occurs. If movement does occur, it may then pass disturbance through the group. In this way, sleeping close together links bodies into one shared system of rest. Each individual is supported by the group, but each individual is also partly constrained by it. Widely accepted work in anthropology and sleep research supports the broad idea that human sleep has long been social rather than purely private. That does not tell us every detail of prehistoric life, and it should not be used to create certainty where evidence is limited. But it does support a modest conclusion. For much of human history, rest likely occurred in proximity to others more often than in solitary isolation. That matters because proximity changes what comfort means. Sleep becomes safer in some ways, yet also more interrupted. The body may relax because others are near, while at the same time remaining responsive to their sounds and movements. This balance helps explain why comfort was probably partial rather than complete. The human organism did not evolve only to sleep alone in a perfectly controlled space. It learned to sleep in company, in shared darkness, with all the advantages and frictions that closeness brings. Even now, traces of that older pattern remain. Some people sleep more easily when another person is nearby, yet sleep more lightly because of that same presence. The contradiction is not new. It belongs to a long human history in which closeness helped make sleep possible, but rarely made it fully comfortable. When several people share the same sleeping space, the body is not only responding to the environment, but also to the rhythms of others. Each person carries their own pattern of movement, breathing, and adjustment, and these patterns do not remain perfectly synchronized. Even if everyone lies still at the beginning of the night, small differences begin to appear over time. One person may shift position slightly earlier, another may turn later, another may adjust posture in response to temperature or pressure. These changes spread through the shared space in quiet ways. They are not always strong enough to wake someone fully, but they can be enough to bring sleep into a lighter state. The body responds, then settles again, repeating this cycle across the night. This interaction between individuals does not require conscious awareness. It happens through physical contact, through sound, and through subtle changes in the immediate surroundings. If one person moves, the surface beneath them may shift slightly. If someone adjusts their position, the distribution of warmth within the group may change. If breathing patterns alter, the acoustic pattern of the space shifts as well. The brain, even during sleep, continues to register these changes at a reduced level. It does not need to interpret them fully. It only needs to detect that something has changed. Once that happens, the depth of sleep may decrease briefly, allowing the body to reassess before returning to rest. This creates a form of shared but unstable stillness, where rest is maintained, but never completely fixed. Another important aspect is that proximity reduces personal control over sleeping conditions. When sleeping alone, the body can adjust position freely without affecting anyone else. In a shared space, movement is limited by the presence of others. A full turn may not be possible without contact. Extending the limbs may be restricted. Changing position may disturb someone nearby, which can lead to hesitation or partial movement instead of a complete adjustment. Over time, this can lead to tension building in certain areas of the body before relief is possible. The result is not necessarily discomfort strong enough to wake a person, but a condition where the body cannot fully settle into a position for long periods. This contributes to a pattern of lighter, more frequently interrupted sleep. Heat also becomes a shared and shifting resource. Bodies close together can reduce heat loss, which is beneficial in cooler conditions, but the distribution of that warmth is not constant. As individuals move, the areas of contact change. One side of the body may become warmer, while another becomes more exposed. If someone moves away, a cooler space may appear. If someone moves closer, heat may build. These changes are gradual, but they influence comfort over time. The body responds by adjusting position, trying to maintain a balance between warmth and pressure. This again leads to repeated small movements that shape the structure of sleep. Anthropological observations from different societies indicate that shared sleeping arrangements are common in many environments where space, resources, or cultural patterns support proximity. While these observations do not define all of human history, they support the general understanding that sleep has often been a social activity rather than an isolated one. This means that the human body has long been accustomed to resting within a field of nearby movement, sound, and shared conditions. It has adapted to this by maintaining a level of responsiveness that allows it to react without fully waking. This adaptation makes sleep possible in a group, but it also limits how stable and uninterrupted that sleep can be. From this perspective, comfort becomes a balance rather than a fixed state. The presence of others can increase safety and warmth, which supports rest. At the same time, it introduces variability that the body must continuously manage. Sleep is not simply interrupted by external forces such as temperature or ground conditions. It is also shaped by the behavior of nearby bodies, each one following its own rhythm. The result is a form of rest that is shared but not fully synchronized, stable enough to allow recovery, yet dynamic enough to prevent long periods of complete stillness. Even in modern environments, where individual sleeping spaces are more common, the body still carries this pattern. It remains sensitive to nearby presence, to shared sound, to subtle movement. This suggests that the difficulty of achieving completely undisturbed comfort is not only a result of external conditions, but also of a long history in which sleep was rarely solitary and rarely free from the influence of others. To sleep near others is to gain protection without gaining full control. That may be one of the quiet contradictions at the center of human rest. For much of human history, closeness likely made sleep more possible, but not more comfortable in the modern sense. The group could reduce exposure, increase warmth, and create a shared zone of awareness. Yet the same group also made the sleeping environment more variable. More bodies meant more heat, more sound, more movement, and less freedom to settle into one stable position for the entire night. Comfort, in that setting, was not the absence of disturbance. It was the ability to continue resting within it. This becomes clearer when we think about what shared sleep actually requires from the body. A person sleeping alone can adjust posture whenever pressure builds, whenever temperature changes, or whenever a limb becomes uncomfortable. In a shared space, that freedom is reduced. Need a sob. The body must move within limits set by nearby bodies, available space, and the physical arrangement of the sleeping place. Even small restrictions matter across many hours. If the body cannot turn fully when needed, or must do so more carefully, strain can build gradually before relief comes. That strain may never become dramatic, but it can keep sleep lighter and more changeable. In this way, sleeping together may have supported survival while also preventing the kind of uninterrupted physical ease that modern people often associate with good rest. There is also the matter of timing. Human sleep does not unfold in perfect unison. People do not all shift, warm, cool, or wake at the same moment. One person may move early in the night, another may become restless later. One body may give off more heat, another less. In a shared space, These differences create a living pattern that changes hour by hour. The body resting inside that pattern must keep adapting. A gap opens and cooler air reaches the skin. Someone turns and changes the pressure on shared material. A nearby sound alters the rhythm of the space. None of these changes needs to be large to matter. Sleep is often shaped by repeated small changes rather than by major interruption. That is why social sleep could be supportive and disruptive at the same time. Anthropological and sleep-related research broadly supports the idea that human rest has often been socially organized rather than strongly individualized. This does not justify certainty about every prehistoric sleeping arrangement, and it should not be used to create details that evidence cannot confirm. But it does support a careful conclusion. For long stretches of human history, sleeping near others was probably common enough that the human body adapted to it. That adaptation did not remove discomfort. Instead, it allowed rest to continue in conditions where privacy, silence, and physical independence were limited. The body learned to remain partly responsive to nearby presence without fully waking each time. This is a useful ability, but it comes with a cost. The cost is that sleep stays open to influence from others. Warmth may be shared, but so is disturbance. Safety may increase, but stillness becomes harder to protect. This helps explain why comfortable sleep is not simply a matter of being near or far from others. Human history suggests that closeness often solved some problems while creating others. Too much separation could mean more exposure. Too much proximity could mean more interruption. The body had to navigate between these conditions, finding enough security to rest, while accepting that rest would rarely be fully private or fully still. Even now, the same old pattern can still be recognized. Some people sleep more easily when another person is nearby, but sleep less steadily because of that same person's movements, sound, or heat. That is not a strange modern contradiction. It likely reflects something older in the design of human rest. The body seems able to draw reassurance from company, while still remaining sensitive to the costs of sharing space. Across most of human history, that balance may have been normal. Sleep was not an isolated retreat into perfect comfort. It was a shared, shifting condition in which closeness helped the body survive the night, even while making deep physical ease harder to maintain. Some of the smallest interruptions to sleep are also the hardest to fully escape. A hard surface can be softened a little. Cold can sometimes be reduced with fire, shelter, or shared warmth. Sound can fade into the background if it remains predictable. But small biting insects, skin irritants, and other persistent nuisances operate differently. They do not need to create danger on a large scale to disturb rest. They only need to break stillness again and again. A body that is almost asleep can endure many things, but repeated small contact on the skin is difficult to ignore for long. This matters because for much of human history, human sleep took place in environments where the boundary between the body and the living world was thin. Ground, plant material, animal skins, shared shelter, and close proximity to other bodies could all increase contact with small organisms or sources of irritation. It would be too strong to describe every sleeping place in the past the same way, because environments differed greatly. But it is widely accepted that pre-modern sleep often occurred in settings where insects and other small external irritants were harder to exclude consistently than they are in many modern sleeping spaces. That alone would have affected comfort. The body responds to skin disturbance quickly. An itch, a bite, or the sensation of something moving across the skin can trigger an immediate reaction even without full waking. A hand lifts, the shoulder shifts, the leg pulls inward, the head turns. These reactions may be brief, but they interrupt the settling process that deeper sleep requires. If the disturbance happens once, the body may return easily to rest. If it happens repeatedly, rest becomes lighter and more fragmented. Sleep continues, but it must repeatedly rebuild itself. This is one reason small irritants matter so much. Their effect comes less from intensity than from repetition. Another important point is that the skin remains one of the body's main channels of contact with the outside world during sleep. Hearing remains partly active, but the skin is in constant physical contact with ground, coverings, air, and nearby bodies. That makes it especially vulnerable to low-level disruption. Pressure, dampness, temperature, and small contact on the skin all work together. A bite or irritation does not happen in isolation. It happens in a body that may already be managing cold ground, shared sleeping space, or uneven support. Under those conditions, even a small disturbance can be enough to tip sleep from deeper rest back toward lighter awareness. In this way, minor skin irritation becomes part of a larger pattern of unstable comfort. Shared sleeping arrangements could make this more complicated. Proximity to others helped with warmth and safety, but it could also increase the difficulty of fully avoiding small nuisances. Closely shared materials, repeated use of the same sleeping area, and limited separation between bodies and surroundings meant that some sources of irritation could persist more easily than in highly controlled modern environments. This is a cautious conclusion, but it is consistent with the broad anthropological picture that sleep for most of human history took place in conditions that were more exposed, less sealed, and more entangled with the natural environment. The problem, then, was not only large discomforts such as cold or hard ground, it was also the constant possibility of tiny interruptions that the body could never fully predict or fully block out. This helps explain something important about human sleep. Comfort depends not only on major conditions being good enough, but also on minor disturbances being rare enough for the body to remain settled. When those minor disturbances keep returning, sleep loses continuity. It may still be sufficient for survival. It may still bring restoration, but it becomes harder for the body to rest as if the world has truly gone quiet. Even now, a small itch or brief skin irritation can have a surprisingly large effect at night, much greater than it would during the day. That reaction may seem trivial, but it points to a deeper truth. Human sleep has long depended on a fragile truce between the resting body and the many small forces that continue to touch it after dark. For much of human history, that truce was probably harder to maintain than it is now, not because every night was unbearable, but because the body was rarely given a completely protected surface on which to disappear fully into sleep. What makes small irritants so disruptive is not only that they touch the body, but that they do so unpredictably. The sleeping body can often adapt to steady conditions. It can accept constant pressure, regular sound, or a stable level of cool air more easily than sudden, repeated changes on the skin. A brief bite, a crawling sensation, or a patch of irritation creates exactly that kind of change. It interrupts not by force, but by timing. Just as the body begins to settle more deeply, the signal arrives and pulls attention back toward the surface. The reaction may be slight, but it is enough. A hand moves, the face turns, the legs shift, or the torso tightens for a moment. Sleep is not always broken completely, but it is prevented from becoming fully continuous. Across a single night, repeated disturbances of this kind can shape the entire structure of rest. Another reason they matter is that the skin is not passive during sleep. It continues to register contact, pressure, airflow, and texture even when awareness has receded. This is widely consistent with what is known about sleep physiology. The body does not stop sensing the outside world. It merely changes the threshold at which a signal becomes important enough to alter rest. Small skin disturbances sit close to that threshold. They may not always wake a person fully, but they often cross the line that triggers repositioning or brief arousal. This means that even low-level irritation can influence how long the body remains in deeper stages before returning to lighter sleep. The effect is cumulative. One brief interruption may matter little. Many small ones repeated across hours create a different kind of night. The sleeping environment also makes a difference. A body resting in a highly enclosed and protected setting is less exposed to these minor external contacts. But for much of human history, sleeping spaces were more open to surrounding conditions. Ground materials, plant matter, reused bedding, animal hides in some contexts, and shelters that were not tightly sealed would all have made complete separation from small nuisances difficult. It would go too far to describe all past sleeping places the same way, and the evidence does not support that kind of certainty. Conditions differed by climate, region, season, and material culture. Still, the broader and widely accepted point remains. For most of human existence, the body likely rested in environments where minor skin irritants were harder to exclude consistently than they are in many modern settings. That makes them part of the larger explanation for why sleep was often workable but not fully comfortable. There is also an important link between these irritants and the body's need for stillness. Deeper sleep depends on the body remaining undisturbed long enough for restoration to continue, but skin-level disturbances work against stillness directly. They call for immediate local response. Unlike cold, which may build gradually, or noise, which may be filtered if it becomes familiar, a sudden irritation on the skin often demands movement at once. That movement may be small, yet it resets the body's posture and changes its level of alertness. If this happens repeatedly, the body spends more of the night in lighter transitions rather than sustained depth. The disturbance is minor in scale but important in effect. Shared sleeping conditions could intensify this pattern. When bodies sleep near one another, materials are shared, surfaces are reused, and the immediate environment becomes more difficult to control fully. Closeness can help with warmth and protection, but it can also make complete physical separation from skin irritants less likely. That does not mean shared sleep was primarily harmful. It means that one solution to danger and cold could carry its own subtler costs. This fits the larger theme running through the history of human rest. Each way of making sleep possible often solved one problem while leaving another in place. Even now, the body's strong reaction to a small itch at night can seem out of proportion, but it may not be out of proportion at all. It may reflect an old design in which the sleeping body remained highly sensitive to anything that made direct contact with the skin. Across much of human history, that sensitivity would have helped the body respond quickly in exposed conditions. It also meant that sleep remained vulnerable to very small interruptions. Not every night would have been defined by them, but they were likely common enough to matter. The result was a form of rest that could continue under imperfect conditions, yet rarely escape them entirely. Comfort remained possible in moments, but difficult to hold steadily when the surface of the body itself could be drawn back into awareness again and again by the smallest things in the dark. The difficulty with small night disturbances is that they do not stay small once. They begin to repeat. A single irritation on the skin may cause only a brief reaction. The body shifts, touches the area, changes posture, and moves back towards sleep. But when this happens again and again across the night, the effect is no longer local. It begins to shape the whole structure of rest. Sleep becomes something the body must keep rebuilding. It is allowed to deepen, then pulled back toward the surface, then allowed to deepen again. This repeated interruption does not always produce full awakening, but it reduces continuity, and continuity is one of the quiet foundations of comfort. Without it, rest may still happen, but it becomes thinner, more fragile, and more dependent on constant adjustment. This matters because sleep is not disturbed only by large threats. It is also shaped by minor signals that the body cannot safely ignore. A small bite, a slight crawling sensation, or a patch of irritation may seem trivial in daylight. When the body is active and attention is spread across many things. At night, the same signal becomes larger because the body is trying to become still. In stillness, the surface of the body becomes more noticeable. The skin remains in contact with air, coverings, ground, and nearby bodies, and that contact continues to send information inward. The brain does not shut these signals off completely. It lowers their place in awareness, but when something changes suddenly, that change rises quickly. In that sense, small irritants have a special power at night because they speak directly to the body's most exposed boundary. They do not need to be severe. They only need to arrive at the wrong moment. Again and again, across much of human history, this would have been difficult to avoid completely. Sleeping spaces were often more open to the surrounding world than many modern bedrooms are now. Materials used for bedding or covering may have offered warmth or softness in some cases, but they did not create a sealed environment. The body remained closer to soil, plant matter, reused surfaces, animal materials in some contexts, and changing outdoor conditions. It would be too strong to claim the same level of irritation everywhere, because environments varied greatly and evidence has limits. But the broad, widely accepted conclusion is still careful and clear. Pre-modern sleeping environments were generally harder to isolate from small external nuisances than highly controlled modern ones. That alone would have made uninterrupted comfort less reliable. There is also a deeper pattern here. Throughout the history of human sleep, each improvement in one direction often left another difficulty in place. Shared sleeping could increase warmth and safety, But closeness also increased exposure to movement and contact. Ground materials could soften pressure, but they could also hold dampness or invite irritation. Shelter could reduce wind, but it could not remove every source of disturbance. Small skin-level interruptions fit into that broader picture. They were part of the many ways sleep remained possible without becoming fully protected. The body adapted not by escaping every interruption, but by learning to keep resting in spite of them. That adaptation was useful, yet it came with a limit. Comfort could rarely become complete. Even now, in more protected spaces, the body still reacts strongly to brief skin irritation at night. That reaction feels immediate and almost disproportionate, but it may reflect a much older condition. The sleeping body has long been shaped to notice what touches it. Across many generations, that sensitivity would have helped maintain awareness in exposed environments. At the same time, it would have made sleep easier to disturb by the smallest contact. This helps complete the picture of why humans could not sleep comfortably for so much of their history. The problem was not only danger, cold, hard ground, or noise. It was also that the body remained physically open to a world full of tiny interruptions. Each one was small, but together they made comfort difficult to preserve for long. Sleep could still come, recovery could still happen, but the body rarely had the chance to disappear fully into rest without the surface of the world reaching back for it. For most of human history, sleep did not unfold under a fixed schedule created by clocks, curtains, and electric light. It unfolded under changing darkness. That difference matters because the human body does not sleep in isolation from light. It uses light to organize wakefulness, rest, hormone timing, and the slow movement into and out of sleep. In the modern world, artificial light extends the day and allows people to ignore many natural signals. But long before that, the opposite problem was often more important. Night arrived without precision, darkness varied by season, and the conditions surrounding sleep could change from one evening to the next. The body had to follow a rhythm shaped by the environment, yet the environment itself was never perfectly stable. This meant that rest was guided by natural timing, but not always comfortably protected by it. Human biology is strongly linked to daily light cycles. This is widely accepted in sleep science. Exposure to light helps regulate circadian rhythms, influencing when the body becomes more alert and when it becomes more prepared for sleep. As darkness increases, the body gradually shifts toward rest. But this shift is not mechanical. It depends on timing, exposure, and surrounding conditions. In natural environments, light fades slowly rather than switching off all at once. Evening is a long transition, not a sharp boundary. That means sleep does not begin at a single clear moment. The body enters it gradually, while the outside world is also gradually changing. Temperature falls, sound patterns shift, and visual certainty decreases. This makes the beginning of the night a moving threshold rather than a fixed point of comfort. Seasonal change adds another layer. Nights are not always the same length. In some periods they stretch longer, in others they contract. Twilight also changes, and with it the pace at which darkness settles. A body that depends on natural light cues must keep adjusting to these shifts across the year. That is not necessarily harmful, but it does make regularity harder to maintain. Sleep timing becomes more flexible, more dependent on season and place, and less fixed in the way many people now expect. This matters for comfort because the body tends to rest more easily when rhythms are stable. When the timing of darkness keeps changing, the structure of rest may also become less settled. The body can adapt, but adaptation does not mean perfect ease. Another important point is that darkness itself does not guarantee security or comfort. It may help signal that the body should rest, but it also reduces visibility and increases uncertainty about the surrounding environment. In that sense, night carries two messages at once. It tells the body to sleep, but it also places the body in conditions where awareness may still be needed. This tension fits the larger pattern already visible in the earlier parts of the script. Human sleep was never shaped by one factor alone. The same darkness that supports biological rest can also make the environment less readable. That means the body is pulled in two directions at once, towards sleep by its internal rhythm, and toward caution by the conditions of the night. Widely accepted research supports the basic role of light in regulating sleep, and anthropology supports the broader idea that before modern lighting, human rest was more closely tied to natural cycles. But being tied to nature did not automatically mean sleeping perfectly in harmony with it. Nature provides rhythm, but not always comfort. A longer night does not guarantee deeper rest if the ground is cold, the air shifts, others move nearby, or sound patterns keep changing. In that world, darkness organized sleep, but it did not secure it. This helps answer the question at the center of the title in a more precise way. Humans could not sleep comfortably for much of their history, not because they lacked sleep altogether, but because rest had to follow rhythms that were real, powerful, and deeply biological while still unfolding in environments that remained unstable. The body could read the falling light and begin to prepare for sleep, but once night arrived, many other forces continued acting on it. So even the natural rhythm that guided rest did not remove the deeper difficulty. It only opened the door to sleep. It did not guarantee that the body, once inside, would remain undisturbed. As the night deepens, the body continues to follow its internal rhythm, but that rhythm does not move in a straight, unbroken line. It rises and falls, creating windows where sleep becomes deeper and others where it naturally becomes lighter. This pattern is widely accepted in sleep science. The body cycles through stages, not because something has gone wrong, but because this is how rest is organized. In stable environments, these cycles can pass quietly, almost unnoticed. But when the surrounding conditions are less stable, the lighter phases become points where the body is more easily affected by what is happening outside. The rhythm itself does not cause disturbance, but it creates moments when disturbance is more likely to be felt. In natural settings, these lighter phases of sleep would have overlapped with a changing environment. The temperature might continue to fall. The ground might feel different after hours of contact. Sounds might shift as the night progresses. Other bodies nearby might move. Each of these changes may be small, but when they meet the body at a moment when sleep is already lighter, they can alter the course of rest. Instead of passing smoothly back into deeper sleep, the body may pause, adjust, or briefly return toward awareness. This does not require a full awakening. It is often enough for the structure of sleep to become more segmented. Rest continues, but it does so in shorter, more fragile phases rather than long, uninterrupted stretches. Another important feature of natural light cycles is that darkness itself is not uniform across the entire night. The period after sunset is different from the middle of the night, and both are different again from the time before dawn. Light levels change gradually, and with them, the cues that guide the body. The approach of morning brings a slow increase in light, even before the sun is fully visible. The body begins to respond to this change, shifting away from its deepest states of rest. In environments without artificial light, this transition would have been more noticeable. Sleep would not end suddenly, but gradually, shaped by the returning light and by the body's own internal timing. This gradual ending can make the final part of the night more sensitive to disturbance. As sleep becomes lighter, even small changes in temperature, sound, or contact can bring the body closer to waking. The body is already preparing to return to full awareness, and the environment only needs to nudge it slightly. This again shows that sleep is not a fixed block of time. It is a moving process, influenced both by internal rhythms and by external conditions that continue to change throughout the night. From an anthropological perspective, it is widely accepted that before the widespread use of artificial lighting, human sleep was more closely aligned with these natural light-dark cycles. Some observations from different societies suggest that sleep could sometimes be divided into segments, with periods of rest separated by quieter wakefulness. This idea should be approached carefully, because patterns vary across cultures and environments, and there is no single model that applies everywhere. But it supports a cautious point. Human sleep has not always been organized into a single, continuous block in all contexts. That makes the modern expectation of perfectly unbroken sleep less universal than it may seem. When this is placed alongside the environmental factors already discussed, a clearer picture appears. The body follows a rhythm that includes natural variation in depth. The environment also changes, sometimes slowly, sometimes unpredictably. When these two patterns meet, sleep becomes something that must constantly adjust. The body deepens, then lightens, then deepens again, while the outside world continues to move. This does not prevent sleep, but it makes it harder for the body to remain in a single, comfortable state for long periods. Even now, in more controlled environments, this underlying structure remains. People often experience deeper sleep in the earlier part of the night and lighter sleep toward the end. They may wake briefly without clear cause, then return to rest. These experiences are common and widely recognized. They reflect the same rhythm that would have operated in earlier human environments, but now with fewer external pressures acting on it. In the past, those pressures were more present, so the rhythm of sleep did not unfold in isolation. It unfolded in contact with a changing world. That contact made rest possible, but it also meant that comfort could rarely remain steady from the beginning of the night to the end. As the night moves toward its end, the balance between sleep and wakefulness begins to shift again. This shift does not happen suddenly. It unfolds gradually, guided by both internal rhythms and the slow return of light. The body does not wait for full daylight to begin preparing for wakefulness. It starts earlier, while darkness is still present. This means that the final portion of the night is often lighter, more responsive, and more easily affected by small changes in the environment. In a controlled space, this may simply lead to a gentle waking, but in less stable conditions, it can mean that sleep becomes increasingly fragile as the night progresses. The body is no longer moving deeper into rest. It is already beginning to move out of it. This creates a window where even minor disturbances can have a stronger effect than they would earlier in the night. This pattern is consistent with widely accepted knowledge about circadian rhythms. The body does not treat all parts of the night equally. Early periods tend to support deeper sleep, while later periods naturally include more time in lighter stages. When this natural structure meets an environment that is changing, cooling air, shifting ground, intermittent sound, nearby movement, the result is a form of rest that becomes progressively less stable. Each small change has more influence because the body is already closer to waking. A slight drop in temperature, a shift in shared space, or a change in sound pattern can now be enough to interrupt the final stages of sleep. This does not always lead to full awakening, but it can shorten the remaining period of rest or make it more fragmented. Another factor is that early morning conditions are rarely identical to those at the beginning of the night. The ground may have cooled further, moisture may have increased, air movement may change direction. The position that felt acceptable earlier may no longer provide the same balance of warmth and support. The body responds by adjusting, but these adjustments now occur in a phase of sleep that is already lighter. As a result, the return to deeper rest becomes less likely. Instead, the body may hover near the boundary between sleep and waking, moving in and out of shallow states until it finally rises. This process can feel gradual, almost incomplete, as if sleep has ended before it fully settled. In environments without artificial light, the approach of dawn introduces another change. Even before the sun is visible, the increase in ambient light can begin to influence the body. Light reaching the eyes, even through closed lids, can affect internal timing. The body interprets this as a signal that the night is ending. This does not necessarily cause immediate waking, but it reinforces the shift toward lighter sleep. When combined with other small disturbances, it makes it harder for the body to return to deeper stages. Sleep becomes less about maintaining rest and more about transitioning out of it. Anthropological and biological research supports the general idea that human sleep is closely tied to natural light cycles, and that these cycles influence both the beginning and the end of rest. It also suggests that sleep patterns are varied across environments and cultures, rather than following a single fixed model. This means that the final portion of the night has likely always been shaped by a combination of internal rhythm and external change. It was not a protected block of deep, uninterrupted rest. It was a transition period, where the body gradually re-engaged with the world. When viewed in the context of the entire night, this helps complete the picture of why sleep was rarely fully comfortable across long stretches of human history. The body began the night by adjusting to darkness and environmental conditions. It moved through cycles of deeper and lighter rest while responding to pressure, temperature, sound, and proximity to others. And as the night ended, it entered a phase where those same influences became more noticeable again. At no point was the body completely free from the need to respond. Rest was always in dialogue with the environment, never fully separated from it. Even now, in more stable settings, this structure remains visible. Many people find that the last part of the night is the most easily disturbed. Sleep becomes lighter, more sensitive, and more likely to end early. This is not simply a modern problem. It reflects an older pattern in which the body was designed to wake gradually as the world changed around it. The difference is that now the environment is often more controlled, while in the past it was more variable. That variability did not prevent sleep, but it made the final part of the night particularly fragile. In that sense, the return of light did not simply end sleep. It revealed how close to the surface sleep had been all along. Sleep in a group is not only shaped by proximity and shared space, but also by the simple fact that not everyone can be equally still at the same time. Even without any formal system, human groups tend to include individuals who move, wake, or remain more alert at different moments during the night. This does not require planning or conscious coordination. It emerges from natural variation in how bodies respond to fatigue, temperature, sound, and internal rhythms. Some people settle earlier, some shift more often, some wake briefly and return to sleep. When these differences overlap, the result is a pattern in which complete stillness across the entire group becomes unlikely. Instead, there is almost always some level of activity present, even if it is quiet and brief. This matters because it changes the background condition in which each individual tries to rest. A person is not sleeping in isolation, but within a shared field of small movements and intermittent awareness. This creates a subtle form of distributed alertness. Not everyone is fully awake, but not everyone is equally deep in sleep either. At any given moment, someone may be closer to the surface of sleep, more responsive to sound or movement. This kind of pattern is consistent with widely accepted observations in sleep science that human sleep depth varies over time and differs between individuals. It is also supported by anthropological observations suggesting that sleep in less controlled environments often includes periods of wakefulness scattered across the night. These observations should be treated carefully, without assuming a single fixed pattern for all human groups, but they support a modest conclusion. Sleep has often been unevenly distributed in time, rather than perfectly synchronized. In such a setting, the presence of someone who is more alert at a given moment can contribute to group safety. If a change occurs in the environment, that person may respond first, others may follow, or may remain asleep if nothing further happens. This does not require a planned system of guarding. It arises naturally from the way sleep cycles differ between individuals. Over time, this creates a situation where the group as a whole maintains a level of responsiveness without requiring every member to stay fully awake. This can be seen as an advantage, but it also has an effect on comfort. The presence of partial wakefulness within the group means that small movements and sounds are more likely to occur. Even if each individual disturbance is minor, their combined effect can prevent the entire group from reaching a state of complete stillness. For the individual sleeper, this means that rest takes place within a shifting environment. At one moment, the group may be quiet. At another, a nearby movement may occur. The body responds, often without full awareness, adjusting slightly, returning to lighter sleep, then settling again. This pattern does not necessarily prevent recovery. It allows sleep to continue, but it reduces the chance of long, uninterrupted periods of deep rest. The body is always, in some sense, sharing the night with others who are moving through their own cycles. There is also a temporal dimension to this. The night is long, and fatigue does not affect everyone at the same time or in the same way. Some individuals may wake briefly in the middle of the night and remain quiet for a short period before returning to sleep. Others may adjust posture more frequently. These differences create a sequence of overlapping states across the group. At no single point is everyone completely still for long. This contributes to an environment where sleep is maintained through constant low-level change rather than stable inactivity. Widely accepted research in both biology and anthropology supports the idea that human sleep is flexible and influenced by both internal rhythms and social context. It does not require a strict uniform pattern to function, but flexibility also means variability, and variability reduces the likelihood of perfect comfort. The body can rest in such conditions, but it does so while remaining responsive to the presence of others. This reinforces the broader pattern seen throughout the script. Human sleep has long been a balance between rest and connection. Even in moments of deep fatigue, the body does not fully detach from its surroundings. It remains linked to the group, to movement, to sound, and to change. That link makes sleep possible in shared environments, but it also means that comfort is never complete. The individual does not rest alone. They rest within a living system that continues to move, however quietly, throughout the night. When wakefulness appears at different moments across a group, it does not remain limited to one individual. It changes the shared environment in small but continuous ways. A person who becomes slightly alert may adjust posture, shift weight, or change breathing. These actions are often minimal, but they alter the pattern of the space. The ground or surface may move slightly, the distribution of warmth may change, and the acoustic rhythm of the group may shift. Other bodies, even while asleep, can register these changes at a low level. They do not need to wake fully. It is enough for sleep to become lighter for a moment, allowing the body to reassess before returning to rest. This is how brief and scattered moments of wakefulness can influence the entire group without becoming clear interruptions. The night becomes a sequence of overlapping adjustments rather than a single stable condition. This pattern aligns with widely accepted knowledge that human sleep varies in depth across time and differs between individuals. In a shared environment, these differences do not disappear. They interact. At any given moment, some individuals are closer to deeper sleep, while others are closer to waking. When a change occurs, those in lighter stages are more likely to respond. Their response then becomes part of the environment again, affecting others in turn. This creates a continuous exchange between individual states and shared conditions. The group does not remain still for long periods. It moves slowly and unevenly, following the combined rhythms of its members. From the perspective of comfort, this means that stillness is difficult to maintain. Even if the external environment remains quiet, the group itself introduces variation. One person shifts position, another adjusts in response to pressure or temperature, another reacts to the change in sound or movement. These actions are not synchronized, but they overlap. Over the course of a night, they create a pattern in which complete stability is rare. The body resting within this pattern must remain responsive, even when it is deeply fatigued. It settles, then adjusts, then settles again. This repeated process does not prevent sleep, but it shapes it into shorter, more flexible segments rather than long, uninterrupted periods. There is also a timing aspect to this interaction. The night is long, and the distribution of wakefulness changes as it progresses. Early in the night, more individuals may be in deeper sleep. Later, lighter stages become more common, and brief awakenings may occur more frequently. As this happens, the number of small movements within the group can increase. The environment becomes more dynamic, even if no major disturbance is present. This makes the final portion of the night especially sensitive to change. The body is already closer to waking, and the group is already more active at a low level. Under these conditions, even small adjustments can influence how long rest continues. Anthropological and biological research supports the general idea that human sleep has often been flexible and influenced by social context. It does not require a single uniform pattern to function. However, flexibility brings variability, and variability reduces the likelihood of complete comfort. The body can adapt to shared sleep, but it does so by remaining partly open to the movements and rhythms of others. This openness allows rest to continue in a group, but it also prevents the environment from becoming fully still. Even now, when people sleep near others, the same pattern can be observed. One person turns, another shifts, another adjusts in response. These movements are often small, yet they influence how deeply and how steadily sleep can unfold. The body does not isolate itself completely. It remains linked to the presence of others, responding in quiet ways that are rarely remembered but consistently repeated. Across much of human history, this shared and shifting environment would have been common. It allowed sleep to occur in conditions where isolation was not always possible, but it also meant that comfort had limits. The body could rest within the group, but it rarely did so in complete stillness. Instead, It moved through the night in response to others, maintaining a balance between rest and connection that made sleep possible, yet never entirely undisturbed. When a group moves through the night in overlapping patterns of sleep and brief wakefulness, the result is not disorder but a kind of quiet instability that never fully settles. At no point is every individual equally still, and at no point is the group fully awake. This creates an environment that supports rest, but never becomes completely stable for long. Each body follows its own rhythm, shifting position, adjusting to temperature, or briefly rising closer to awareness. These changes are small, but they do not remain isolated. They spread through the shared space, altering pressure on the ground, shifting warmth, and changing the pattern of sound. The body lying within this environment does not experience stillness as a fixed state. It experiences stillness as something temporary, something that can be interrupted at any moment by the quiet actions of others. Over time, this leads to a form of sleep that is flexible rather than continuous. The body settles, then responds, then settles again, repeating this cycle across the night without fully recognizing it. This pattern is consistent with widely accepted knowledge that human sleep naturally moves between deeper and lighter stages, and that individuals do not move through these stages in perfect synchrony. In a shared setting, these differences combine rather than cancel out. At any given moment, someone is closer to waking, and that person becomes more responsive to change. Their response, even if minimal, becomes part of the environment again, influencing others. This creates a chain of small reactions that move quietly through the group. No single disturbance is large, but together they prevent the environment from becoming fully still. From the perspective of comfort, this matters because the body depends on a certain level of continuity to remain deeply at rest. When the environment keeps shifting, even in small ways, the body cannot remain in one state for long. It must keep adjusting, and each adjustment brings it slightly closer to awareness before it returns to rest again. This does not prevent sleep, but it changes its structure. Instead of long, uninterrupted depth, sleep becomes layered, made of shorter segments, connected by brief moments of responsiveness. Anthropological and biological research supports the broader understanding that human sleep has often been shaped by social context, not only by individual conditions. It has taken place in shared environments where multiple bodies influence one another. These findings should be approached carefully, without assuming a single fixed pattern for all human groups, but they support a cautious conclusion. Sleep has long been a collective process, influenced by proximity, shared space, and overlapping rhythms. That collective nature makes sleep more adaptable, but also less stable. The body learns to rest within change, not in its absence. This reflects a larger pattern seen throughout the history of human sleep. Each factor that supports survival, shared warmth, group presence, environmental awareness, also introduces variability. Comfort becomes something partial, something that can be reached for a time but not fully held. Even now, when conditions are more controlled, the same pattern can still be felt. A nearby movement, a shift in sound, or a change in shared space can influence how deeply one sleeps. These effects are often small, but they are consistent. They suggest that the human body has long been shaped to sleep within a living environment rather than a perfectly still one. Across most of human history, that environment was rarely quiet, rarely fixed, and rarely private. It was shared, shifting, and responsive. Sleep was possible within it, but complete comfort, in the sense of total stillness and uninterrupted depth, was likely difficult to maintain for long. For most of human history, sleep did not take place in a single fixed location that remained unchanged night after night. Instead, it often followed movement. Groups shifted across landscapes, adjusted to seasons, responded to resources, and changed their resting places as conditions required. This does not mean that people never returned to familiar locations, but it does suggest that the sleeping environment was often temporary rather than permanent. The body did not return to the same surface, the same arrangement, or the same protective conditions each night. This lack of consistency mattered because comfort depends not only on the quality of a single place, but on the ability to rely on that place over time. When the environment keeps changing, the body must keep adjusting. It cannot fully settle into a known pattern. Each new resting place introduces small uncertainties that shape how sleep begins and how it continues. A new surface must be tested. The ground may feel different under pressure. The distribution of support may not match what the body experienced before. Temperature may behave differently, depending on exposure, elevation, or surrounding materials. The presence of sound may change as well, with different patterns of wind, insects, or distant movement. None of these differences needs to be large to matter. Sleep is sensitive to small variations, especially at the beginning of the night, when the body is still transitioning into rest. If the environment is unfamiliar, the body may take longer to settle, maintaining a slightly higher level of alertness until it adapts. This effect is consistent with widely accepted observations that unfamiliar sleeping environments can influence sleep depth and continuity. In modern research, this is sometimes described as a form of partial vigilance when sleeping in a new place, where one part of the brain remains more responsive to external signals. While this concept should not be extended beyond what evidence supports, it aligns with a broader and cautious idea. The body does not immediately treat a new environment as fully safe or stable. It adjusts gradually, and during that adjustment, sleep may remain lighter. In earlier human contexts where sleeping locations changed more frequently, this kind of adaptation may have been a regular part of rest rather than an occasional exception. Another consequence of movement is that preparation for sleep could not always be optimized in the same way each night. In a fixed setting, materials can be arranged, surfaces improved, and conditions gradually refined. In a temporary setting, such refinement is limited. Available materials depend on what is present in the immediate environment. The arrangement may be functional, but not ideal. The body must work with what is available rather than what is consistent. This introduces variation not only between different nights, but within a single night as well, if materials shift or lose effectiveness over time. From an anthropological perspective, it is widely accepted that human groups have lived in a range of mobile and semi-mobile ways, depending on environment, resources, and cultural practices. While not all groups moved frequently, and while patterns varied greatly, the broader picture supports the idea that sleeping environments were often less fixed and less standardized than in modern life. This variability would have influenced how sleep was experienced, making it less predictable and less uniform. The body adapted by remaining flexible, by adjusting to new conditions, and by maintaining a level of responsiveness that allowed it to rest without fully depending on stability. This helps explain another layer of why comfortable sleep was difficult to maintain across long stretches of human history. It was not only that each environment contained challenges, but that the environment itself could change from night to night. The body did not always have the chance to learn one space deeply enough to relax completely within it. Instead, it moved through a sequence of places, each one requiring a small process of adjustment. Even now, this pattern can still be recognized. Sleeping in a new place often feels different, even when conditions are comfortable. The body may take longer to settle, may wake more easily, or may sleep more lightly at first. This reaction is not unusual. It reflects a sensitivity to unfamiliar surroundings that has likely been present for a long time. Across most of human history, that sensitivity would have been used regularly, not occasionally. Sleep had to occur in changing environments, and the body adapted to that by never fully assuming that each new place would remain stable or secure for the entire night. When the sleeping place changes from night to night, the body does not only adjust once at the beginning, it continues adjusting across the entire night because the environment is not yet fully understood. Each place carries its own pattern of ground texture, temperature behavior, sound, and exposure, and these patterns take time for the body to recognize. Until that recognition becomes stable, sleep often remains lighter and more responsive. This is consistent with widely accepted observations in sleep research that unfamiliar environments can lead to a form of partial vigilance, where the brain remains slightly more alert even during rest. This does not require conscious awareness. It is a quiet adjustment that allows the body to remain responsive while it is still learning the surroundings. In a setting where sleeping locations change frequently, this adjustment would not be occasional. It would be part of the normal structure of sleep. The body would enter rest while still testing the environment in small ways, rather than fully settling into it from the beginning. This has an important effect on comfort. In a familiar place, the brain gradually learns which signals can be ignored. A repeated sound becomes background, a certain surface becomes expected, and the body can reduce its level of monitoring. In a new place, that process has not yet completed. The brain must continue comparing what it senses with what it expects, but expectation itself is still forming. This means that even small changes can draw attention more easily. A slight shift in sound, a small change in pressure, or a variation in temperature may be enough to bring the body back toward a lighter state of sleep. Over time, as the environment becomes more familiar, these responses may decrease. But if the environment changes again the next night, the process begins again from the start. From a biological perspective, this suggests that the body is not only sensitive to the quality of a sleeping place, but also to its consistency over time. Comfort depends not just on how good a single night's conditions are, but on whether those conditions can be predicted and trusted. When they cannot, the body remains slightly engaged, maintaining a level of awareness that allows it to adapt quickly. This responsiveness is useful in changing environments, but it also limits how deeply and continuously the body can rest. Instead of moving directly into stable sleep, the body moves through a series of adjustments, each one bringing it closer to rest, but never allowing it to fully disconnect from the surroundings. Anthropological evidence supports the broader idea that many human groups have lived in ways that involve movement across landscapes, with sleeping places that are not permanently fixed. While the details vary greatly and should not be simplified, the general pattern suggests that sleep has often taken place in environments that change over time rather than remain constant. This variability would have required the body to remain adaptable, to treat each night as slightly different from the one before. It would not have prevented sleep, but it would have shaped it into a form that is responsive rather than fully settled. Even in modern life, this pattern can still be observed. Sleeping in a new place often leads to lighter sleep at first, more frequent adjustments or brief awakenings that are not always remembered. The body takes time to adapt, even when the environment is comfortable by objective standards. This suggests that the difficulty of achieving immediate, stable comfort is not only a feature of poor conditions, but also of unfamiliar ones. Across most of human history, that unfamiliarity would have been common. The body did not always return to the same place night after night. It moved, adapted, and repeated the process. As a result, sleep became something that could happen under changing conditions, but rarely became fully anchored to a single predictable environment. When the sleeping place does not remain the same over time, the body never fully builds a sense of continuity around it. Each night becomes a new starting point rather than a continuation of the last. This matters because sleep is not only a biological process but also a process shaped by familiarity. The body learns patterns through repetition. It learns how a surface supports weight, how temperature changes across the night, how sound behaves in the surrounding space. When those patterns remain consistent, the body can reduce its level of monitoring and move more easily into deeper rest. When they do not, the body must keep testing the environment in small ways. It settles, but not completely. It rests, but with a degree of openness that allows it to respond if something does not match expectation. Over many nights, this repeated adjustment shapes the structure of sleep itself. It becomes flexible, able to occur in different conditions, but less likely to become fully stable for long periods. This is consistent with widely accepted observations in sleep research that familiarity with a sleeping environment supports deeper and more continuous rest, while unfamiliar settings can lead to lighter sleep and increased responsiveness. The evidence does not suggest a single universal pattern for all people or all times, but it supports a cautious conclusion. The body tends to rest more deeply when it can rely on known conditions, and more lightly when it cannot. In earlier human contexts where sleeping locations could change depending on movement, season, or available resources, this reliance on familiarity would have been harder to maintain. The body would have been capable of adapting, but adaptation would have been ongoing rather than complete. Another effect of changing environments is that preparation for sleep cannot accumulate in the same way. In a fixed place, materials can be arranged, surfaces improved, and small adjustments carried forward from one night to the next. Over time, this creates a space that supports the body more consistently. In a temporary setting, that accumulation is limited. Each night begins with what is immediately available. Materials may differ, the ground may vary, and the arrangement may not be refined through repeated use. The body must do more of the work itself, adjusting posture, responding to pressure, and adapting to conditions that have not been shaped specifically for rest. This does not prevent sleep, but it makes comfort more dependent on the body's ability to respond than on the stability of the environment. There is also a broader pattern that connects this to the earlier factors. A changing sleeping place often brings changes in temperature, sound, surface, and proximity to others all at once. The body is not adapting to one variable, but to several at the same time. Each one may be manageable on its own, but together they create a more complex environment. Sleep becomes a process of continuous negotiation rather than a stable condition. The body remains capable of resting within that negotiation, but it rarely reaches a point where all conditions align for long enough to create uninterrupted comfort. Anthropological research, approached carefully, supports the idea that human sleep has often occurred in a range of environments rather than in a single fixed type of space. While patterns differ across cultures and landscapes, the general conclusion is that variability has been a common feature of human life. That variability extends to sleep. It does not mean that rest was always difficult, but it suggests that rest was often shaped by changing conditions rather than by consistent ones. This helps complete the explanation for this part of the story. The difficulty of sleeping comfortably for much of human history was not only about specific problems such as cold, hard ground, or noise. It was also about the absence of continuity. The body did not always return to the same place, the same surface, or the same set of conditions. Instead, it moved through a sequence of environments, each one requiring adjustment. Even now, this pattern can still be felt when sleeping in unfamiliar places. The body may take longer to settle, may remain more responsive, or may shift more frequently during the night. These reactions are widely recognized and do not depend on extreme conditions. They reflect a basic feature of human sleep. It depends on both the body and the environment, and when the environment changes, the body must remain partly engaged. Across most of human history, that engagement would have been constant. Sleep was possible, but it was rarely anchored to a single stable setting. It unfolded across changing ground, shifting conditions, and unfamiliar spaces, making comfort something that could be reached, but not easily held from one night to the next. Sleep is often imagined as a state where the mind withdraws completely from the world, but human sleep does not fully operate that way. Even in deeper stages, the brain does not become inactive. It changes how it processes information, reducing awareness of most signals while still remaining capable of responding to certain kinds of change. This balance between rest and responsiveness is widely accepted in sleep science. The brain continues to monitor the environment at a reduced level, allowing the body to remain connected enough to react if needed. Across most of human history, this feature would not have been optional. It would have been part of how sleep remained possible in conditions where the environment could not be fully controlled or predicted. The body did not simply shut down for the night. It entered a state that allowed recovery while preserving a limited connection to the outside world. This connection shaped how sleep was structured. Instead of remaining in a single, deep and continuous state, the brain moves through cycles, alternating between deeper and lighter stages. In lighter stages, responsiveness is higher. Sounds, movements, or changes in temperature are more likely to be detected. In deeper stages, awareness decreases, but these periods are bounded. They do not last indefinitely. The body returns regularly to lighter phases, where it can reassess the environment. This cycling pattern can be understood as a form of balance. It allows the body to gain the benefits of deep rest while maintaining the ability to respond to change. In stable environments, this pattern may pass with little interruption. In less stable conditions, it becomes more visible. Each return to lighter sleep creates an opportunity for external factors to influence rest. This helps explain why human sleep often feels segmented rather than perfectly continuous. From a biological perspective, this structure is not a flaw. It reflects an adaptation to conditions where complete disconnection from the environment would not have been reliable. A body that remained entirely unresponsive for long periods would have been less able to react to changes that required attention. Over long periods of time, the balance shifted toward a system that preserves some degree of openness. This openness is not the same as wakefulness. It is a reduced, selective form of awareness that operates in the background. The sleeping brain filters most signals, but it does not eliminate them entirely. When something changes in a way that stands out from the expected pattern, the system responds. Sleep becomes lighter, posture shifts, or the body moves toward waking. This response can happen quickly, often without full consciousness. Anthropological perspectives, used carefully, support the idea that human sleep has long taken place in environments where such responsiveness would have been useful. This does not mean that every night was filled with disturbance or that the body was constantly alert. It means that the structure of sleep itself is compatible with change. It allows the body to rest while remaining capable of responding. This compatibility is one of the reasons human sleep can occur in a wide range of conditions. At the same time, it introduces a limit. Because the brain does not fully disconnect, sleep is always open to interruption. Even small changes can influence how long the body remains in deeper stages before returning to lighter ones. This creates a pattern in which rest is layered and responsive, rather than fixed and isolated. When considering the question of comfort, this becomes important. A perfectly comfortable sleep would require the body to remain deeply at rest without needing to monitor the environment. But the human system is not designed to do that for long periods. It moves in and out of depth, maintaining a balance between recovery and awareness. This balance made sleep possible across many different environments, but it also meant that sleep rarely became completely undisturbed. Even now, in controlled conditions, the same structure remains. The brain continues to cycle, continues to filter and respond, and continues to return periodically to states where it can reassess the surroundings. This suggests that the difficulty of achieving fully comfortable sleep is not only a result of external factors such as ground, temperature, or sound. It is also built into the way the brain organizes rest. The body does not aim for complete separation from the world. It aims for a state where rest and connection can coexist. Across most of human history, this design would have been necessary. It allowed sleep to happen in conditions that were never fully stable, but it also meant that comfort, in the sense of total stillness and uninterrupted depth, was always limited by the need to remain, even slightly, aware. If the brain never fully disconnects during sleep, then rest is not a complete withdrawal but a controlled reduction. The system lowers awareness, but it does not remove it. This has a direct effect on how easily sleep can be influenced. The boundary between sleeping and waking is not fixed. It is a moving threshold, one that can be crossed in both directions depending on what the body senses. During deeper stages, that threshold is higher, and the body is less responsive. During lighter stages, it becomes lower, and small changes can bring the body closer to waking. This pattern is widely accepted in sleep science, and reflects how the brain balances restoration with the need to remain responsive. Across the night, the body passes through these thresholds many times, and each passage creates an opportunity for the environment to shape the depth of rest. In a stable environment, these transitions may remain smooth and barely noticeable. In a changing environment, they become points where sleep is more easily altered. The brain continues to filter incoming signals, but filtering is not the same as ignoring. It involves comparison. The system evaluates whether a signal matches what is expected or whether it represents a change. When the signal fits the pattern, it is allowed to pass without strong reaction. When it does not, the system shifts toward alertness. This evaluation does not require conscious thought. It happens automatically, as part of how sensory information is processed during sleep. This means that sleep is not protected from the environment. It is continuously interacting with it at a low level. Even when nothing dramatic happens, the brain remains engaged in this quiet process of comparison. This helps explain why sleep can be interrupted by very small changes, especially when they occur at moments when the body is already closer to waking. Another important aspect is that different types of signals are treated differently. A familiar sound, repeated over time, may become part of the background and have little effect. A sudden change in that sound, even if it is not louder, can be more influential. A stable temperature may be tolerated, but a gradual shift may lead to adjustment. A consistent surface may allow the body to settle, but a new pressure point may require movement. The brain is not reacting to intensity alone, it is reacting to difference. This sensitivity to change is useful in environments where conditions are not fully predictable. It allows the body to respond quickly when something alters the pattern, but it also means that sleep remains open to disturbance. The system cannot fully close itself without losing this ability. Anthropological perspectives, used carefully, support the idea that human sleep has long taken place in environments where change was a constant feature. This does not mean that every night was unstable or that rest was always difficult. It means that the structure of sleep had to be compatible with variability. The brain could not assume that conditions would remain the same from the beginning of the night to the end. It had to remain flexible, ready to adjust if needed. This flexibility is built into the cycling pattern of sleep, where lighter stages provide moments of increased responsiveness. From the perspective of comfort, this creates a limit. A completely comfortable sleep would require the body to remain deeply settled without needing to reassess its surroundings. But the human brain does not operate in that way for extended periods. It continues to test the environment in small ways, even while resting. Each test may be brief and unnoticed, but it contributes to a pattern where sleep is never fully sealed off. The body gains the ability to rest under many conditions, but it does so at the cost of continuous sensitivity. Even in modern environments where many external disturbances have been reduced, this pattern remains visible. The brain still moves between deeper and lighter stages, still filters and compares, and still reacts to change. This suggests that the difficulty of achieving completely uninterrupted comfort is not only a matter of improving external conditions, it is also linked to how the brain organizes sleep itself. The system is designed to remain partly open, to balance rest with responsiveness. Across most of human history, this balance would have been essential. It allowed sleep to occur in environments that were never fully stable. At the same time, it meant that the body could rarely remain in one deep, undisturbed state for the entire night. If the brain organizes sleep as a balance between rest and responsiveness, then comfort is always limited by that balance. The body is not designed to remain in a single, deeply detached state for the entire night. It moves through layers, returning again and again to points where the environment can be reassessed. This pattern is widely accepted in sleep science and is visible even in stable, modern settings. The difference across much of human history is that these moments of reassessment were more likely to meet a changing environment. When that happened, the body did not simply continue deeper into rest. It adjusted. It shifted position, altered breathing, or moved toward a lighter state of sleep before settling again. Over time, this created a form of rest that was continuous in a broad sense, but internally divided into many smaller phases. Each phase depended on whether conditions remained stable long enough for the body to remain undisturbed. If they did not, the cycle began again. This does not mean that sleep was ineffective. The body is capable of recovering even when rest is segmented. What it suggests is that the structure of sleep was shaped to function under conditions where complete stability could not be assumed. The brain did not wait for a perfect environment. It worked within the one available, maintaining a level of awareness that allowed it to respond when necessary. This ability is one of the reasons humans can sleep in a wide range of settings, but it also explains why that sleep often lacks the sense of complete stillness that is associated with comfort. The system is designed to remain open even when it is resting. There is also a cumulative effect to this pattern. Each small adjustment, each brief return toward awareness, may seem insignificant on its own, but across a full night, they shape the overall experience of rest. The body does not remain in one uninterrupted state. It moves repeatedly between depth and responsiveness. In environments where conditions remain stable, these movements may pass without noticeable disruption. In environments where conditions change, they become more pronounced. The body may spend more time in lighter stages, more time adjusting, and less time remaining fully settled. This does not prevent sleep, but it changes its character. Rest becomes something that is maintained through flexibility rather than through complete stability. Anthropological perspectives, approached with caution, support the idea that human sleep has long taken place under conditions where variability was normal. While the details differ across cultures and environments, the general pattern is consistent. Sleep was shaped by changing ground, shifting temperature, ongoing sound, proximity to others, and movement across landscapes. The brain structure reflects this reality. It does not assume that the environment will remain unchanged. It continues to monitor, compare, and respond at a reduced level throughout the night. This design allows sleep to continue in imperfect conditions, but it also means that sleep is never fully isolated from those conditions. From the perspective of the central question, this helps bring the explanation into focus. Humans could sleep across many environments and for long stretches of time, but the way the brain organizes rest made complete comfort difficult to sustain. The body did not simply lie still and disappear into sleep. It remained engaged, even if only slightly, with what was happening around it. That engagement ensured that rest could continue in a changing world, but it also ensured that rest would rarely become perfectly stable. Even now, when many external challenges have been reduced, this underlying structure remains. The brain continues to cycle, to filter, and to respond. It continues to return to lighter states where the environment can be reassessed. This suggests that the limits of comfortable sleep are not only historical, they are built into the way human sleep works. The body was shaped to rest while remaining connected to its surroundings, and that connection, however quiet, prevents sleep from becoming completely undisturbed for long. When the conditions for sleep become more stable, the body does not immediately change how it rests. It carries forward patterns that were shaped over long periods of time, even when those patterns are no longer required in the same way. This is a widely accepted idea in biology. Adaptation does not disappear quickly when the environment changes. Instead, older regulatory systems continue to operate alongside newer conditions. In the case of sleep, this means that even when surfaces become softer, temperature becomes more controlled, and exposure to disturbance is reduced, the brain and body still follow the same internal structure. They continue to move between lighter and deeper stages, continue to monitor the environment at a reduced level, and continue to adjust position throughout the night. Comfort may increase, but the underlying pattern does not transform completely. This creates a gap between what the environment offers and how the body responds to it. In a modern setting, many of the external challenges that once shaped sleep are reduced. The ground can be even and supportive, temperature can remain stable, and the space can be separated from many sources of sound or disturbance. These changes make deeper rest more possible, but they do not remove the body's tendency to remain responsive. The brain does not assume that the environment is permanently safe or unchanging. It continues to treat sleep as a state that requires periodic reassessment. This is not because the modern environment is dangerous, but because the system that regulates sleep was formed under conditions where change was always possible. As a result, the body may still wake briefly, shift position, or move through lighter stages even when there is no clear external reason. These patterns are widely recognized and do not depend on poor conditions. They are part of how sleep is organized. Another effect of this mismatch is that modern expectations of sleep may not align fully with human biology. Many people expect sleep to be continuous, uninterrupted, and deeply stable from the moment it begins until it ends. However, widely accepted research shows that sleep naturally includes cycles, brief awakenings, and changes in depth. These features are not necessarily signs of a problem. They reflect the structure of sleep itself. When this structure is compared with modern expectations, a difference appears. The body is functioning according to one pattern, while the expectation is based on another. This can lead to the impression that sleep is incomplete or disturbed, even when it is following its natural rhythm. From an anthropological perspective, it is widely accepted that human sleep has changed alongside changes in living conditions, but not in a simple or uniform way. The introduction of more stable sleeping environments did not instantly produce perfectly stable sleep. Instead, it created conditions in which older patterns could operate with fewer external pressures. This improved comfort, but it did not remove the internal dynamics of sleep. The body still adjusts, still cycles, still remains partly responsive. This suggests that the history of human sleep is not a simple movement from discomfort to comfort. It is a layering of new conditions onto an existing biological system. When viewed in this way, the central question becomes clearer. Humans could not sleep comfortably for much of their history because the environment did not provide stability. But even when stability increases, comfort is not unlimited because the body does not fully release its older patterns. It continues to rest in a way that assumes the possibility of change. This does not prevent sleep. It allows sleep to occur across a wide range of conditions. But it also means that the feeling of perfect stillness and complete disconnection is difficult to maintain for long. Even in quiet, stable spaces, the body may continue to shift, to wake briefly, or to move between stages. These actions are not failures. They are part of a system that has been shaped to balance rest with responsiveness. Across much of human history, that balance was necessary. Today, it remains, even when the conditions that shaped it have been reduced. Even when the sleeping environment becomes far more comfortable than it was for most of human history, the body does not simply enter perfect rest as if all old limits have been removed. Comfort changes the conditions of sleep, but it does not erase the structure of sleep. A softer surface can reduce pressure, stable warmth can reduce heat loss, and shelter can reduce exposure to sound or interruption. All of this matters, and it can make rest easier. But the brain still moves through the same layered pattern of lighter and deeper stages. The body still changes position. Brief returns toward awareness still occur. This is important because it shows that human sleep is not built only from the outside in. It is also built from the inside out. The environment can support rest, but it cannot fully replace the deeper biological pattern that governs how rest unfolds. This helps explain why more comfort does not always lead to a feeling of complete ease. A person may lie on a soft bed, in a quiet room, at a stable temperature, and still find that sleep remains changeable. The body may wake briefly without a clear reason, or shift repeatedly through the night, or move through light sleep before settling again. Widely accepted sleep research supports the idea that these features are normal parts of sleep architecture rather than automatic signs of dysfunction. Sleep is not a single smooth descent into stillness. It is a cycle. And cycles include return. The body goes down into deeper states and then rises partway out of them, again and again. In earlier human settings, these returns helped keep the sleeper connected to a changing world. In modern settings, they still occur even when the world around the sleeper has become more controlled. That is one reason the modern search for completely uninterrupted sleep can create confusion. The expectation may be too absolute for the biology itself. Another part of the mismatch is that the body is not responding only to present conditions, but to patterns shaped over a very long time. In biology, traits and regulatory systems often persist after the original pressures that shaped them have changed. The body does not redesign itself quickly just because the environment becomes easier. It keeps using old systems unless long-term pressures strongly alter them. In the case of sleep, this means the nervous system still behaves as though some level of responsiveness may be useful. It still filters, compares, and reassesses. The external world may now be softer, quieter, and safer, but the internal logic of sleep still carries the older balance between restoration and awareness. This does not mean modern comfort is unimportant. It clearly improves the conditions under which sleep takes place, but it does mean that comfort works within limits already set by the body. It can reduce many burdens, yet it cannot turn human sleep into something entirely different from what it has long been. Anthropological and biological perspectives together support a cautious version of this idea. Human sleeping conditions have changed greatly across time, especially with more stable shelters, bedding, and environmental control. But the human organism remains the same species, carrying a nervous system and sleep patterns shaped across far longer spans than recent improvements in living conditions. That suggests a layered picture rather than a simple one. The body now rests in better conditions, but it does so with older patterns still active beneath the surface. This is why the history of sleep does not end when comfort arrives. The external story changes faster than the internal one. From the perspective of the title, this matters because it prevents the explanation from becoming too simple. Humans could not sleep comfortably for most of their history, because the environment placed many limits on rest. But when those limits are reduced, the body does not instantly become a creature of perfect sleep. It continues to carry the old architecture of rest, with all its cycles, thresholds, and quiet returns toward awareness. In that sense, modern comfort solves many problems, but not all of them. It improves the place where sleep happens. Yet the sleep itself still unfolds according to a deeper pattern that was shaped long before comfort became common. When all of these layers are placed together, the question begins to change. It is no longer only about why sleep was difficult in the past, but about what kind of sleep the human body was shaped to have. Across most of human history, Rest took place on changing ground, in shifting temperatures, within shared spaces, surrounded by sound, exposed to small irritants, and guided by natural cycles that were never perfectly stable. The body did not wait for these conditions to become ideal. It adapted to them. It learned to sleep within movement, within variation, within partial uncertainty. This is supported by widely accepted knowledge in biology, anthropology, and sleep science. Human sleep is flexible, layered, and responsive rather than fixed and fully sealed off from the environment. That flexibility made sleep possible across many different conditions, but it also meant that comfort, in the sense of long, uninterrupted stillness, was difficult to sustain. The brain did not turn off completely. The body did not remain in one position. The environment did not remain unchanged. All of these elements continued to interact, shaping sleep into a process rather than a single stable state. As conditions improved over time, many of the external pressures on sleep were reduced. Surfaces became more supportive, shelter became more stable, and exposure to temperature and disturbance decreased in many contexts. These changes matter, and they allow the body to reach deeper rest more easily, but they do not replace the internal structure of sleep. The brain still cycles, still filters, still returns to lighter stages where the environment can be reassessed. The body still moves, still adjusts, still responds in small ways throughout the night. These patterns are widely recognized and do not depend on poor conditions to appear. They reflect how sleep is organized at a fundamental level. This means that even in the most controlled environments, sleep is not a perfect block of stillness. It remains dynamic, shaped by both internal rhythms and subtle interaction with the surroundings. Seen in this way, the long history of human sleep does not point to a failure that needed to be corrected, but to a system that was built to function under imperfect conditions. The body did not evolve to require perfect comfort before it could rest. It evolved to rest while conditions were only partly supportive. That is why sleep can still occur in a wide range of environments today. But it is also why sleep rarely becomes completely effortless. The same openness that allows the body to adapt also prevents it from fully shutting out the world. Rest remains connected to what surrounds it, even when that connection is quiet and almost invisible. This leads to a more measured understanding of the original question. Humans could not sleep comfortably for most of their history because the environments they lived in were rarely stable enough to support uninterrupted rest. At the same time, the body itself was never shaped to depend on complete stability. It was shaped to balance rest with responsiveness, to move between depth and awareness, to adjust rather than remain fixed. That balance made sleep possible across changing conditions, but it also set a limit on how still and continuous that sleep could become. Even now, when many external challenges have been reduced, the deeper pattern remains. The body still settles gradually, still moves through cycles, still responds to small changes. Comfort can be improved, but it is not absolute. Sleep is not the absence of all disturbance, but the ability to continue resting within it. And when the body lies down at the end of the day, in a place that is softer and quieter than most places in the past, it may still carry a trace of that older design, approaching rest not as a complete withdrawal, but as a careful balance that has been repeated, in one form or another, across a very long human history.